Chapter 1614. The reason why Han Fei dared to go to the Blood Sea Divine Wood City at this time was that he trusted the Nine-Palace ruler of Providence. It wasn't like he hadn't experienced ominous divination before. When had it ever caused his death? Although he was also worried that the Blood Sea Divine Wood would discover him, at least when he drilled into its roots and killed the Blood King's clone, the Blood Sea Divine Wood didn't react at all. Once one reached the exalted realm, even plants would be able to move as swiftly as lightning and the wind. These supremacies had previously suspected the Blood King because they suspected that the supremacies who had left in the past had not sent back any news, believing that they had perished. Moreover, without a half-king realm expert to lead the team, the venerable realm experts below the half-king realm wouldn't have the courage to go there. After all, the outside world seemed to be very dangerous. But now, with a half-monarch realm expert leading the way and supremacies who had previously gone out returning, most people were still willing to trust the Blood King. After all, who would want to be trapped in a cage? Seeing the poison dragon bile and the others enter the void crack, Haizhu could not help but look at Zi Luo. Little Z. Why don't you go? It seems that the outside world is quite tempting. The corners of Zi Luo's mouth curled up. I am still young, I can still live for a long time. Furthermore, I can still cultivate a reincarnation body. There's no rush. Just as the Blood King said, this cage has already reached the point where he can tear it apart. Then, it probably won't last long. Hey, why aren't you coming along? The bamboo branches on Sea Bamboo Man's body trembled. The Blood King is from the same generation as me. I've seen him fight a few times in my life. The last time I saw him was when he fought against a half-step king. Zi Luo shook her head. I haven't seen it. I heard that it happened more than 30,000 years ago. Haizhu Ren nodded slightly. I was there during that battle and saw it with my own eyes. Back then, the Blood King was still at the half-monarch realm. He only needed one strike to kill the wolf beast. That battle had established his position as the strongest. However, after that, he accumulated his strength for 1,000 years and attempted to break through to become a king. In the end, even though he failed, he didn't die. Zi Luo nodded. I know. From then on, he didn't participate in the battle, and he wholeheartedly studied the cage seal. Now, he's finally left. Haizhu Ren nodded slightly. Not bad, this person is extremely patient. Once he decided to do something, there was an 80% chance that he would have complete confidence in it. I vaguely remember that when he underwent his tribulation, he was extremely conceited and went through 8 thunders in a row. Everyone thought that he would be the first peerless heaven's favorite in the cage to become a king. However, the final thunderbolt did not come. Ah! Zi Luo said in shock, didn't come. Haizhu Ren, there aren't many people who know about this anymore. But it was precisely because of this that many demon plants understood that it was impossible to become a king in a cage. Therefore, no one disturbed the Blood King when he was studying the cage. Zi Luo said in shock, then now, you mean, he's going to cross the tribulation and become a king? Haizhu Ren said unhurriedly, this is what I am confused about. If there were already kings in the outside world, would they really share the world with him? Furthermore, the appearance of the 10,000 poison gall was too hasty. The explanation was not thorough enough. I think there's something fishy about this. The other side. Han Fei attached himself to the serpent vine, and the 36 serpents crossed the void together. This void passageway was actually not short. Tens of millions of void cracks swept across, and all the venerables unleashed their full power. The power of the Great Path was almost exerted to the extreme, and they almost burned their vitality. In the end, when the power of these people was almost exhausted, the crack on the opposite side finally opened. The 36 serpents flew out at the same time and drilled out of the crack in an instant. Ha ha ha, are you finally out? Are you finally out of the cage? Where is this? No. This is not the outside world we saw. Why are there so many immortal hero souls here? Damn it, what the hell is this place? Why is there no spiritual energy or energy at all? Oh no, the Blood King deceived us. Let's go back. However, when they looked back, there was no way out. Poisonous Dragon Bile suddenly shouted, Blood King, what do you mean? We are not familiar with each other, but you don't have to trick us. If there's anything, let's talk about it openly. There's no need to make a scene. Ha! A bunch of idiots. In the void, red leaves were falling, and a handsome man stood proudly in the void with a mocking expression. If you had followed me out immediately, maybe I would have chosen a few subordinates. However, you are too prejudiced against me. I don't feel at ease using you. I might as well use you all as resources for my tribulation. Swish, 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 crack, the void collapsed, and a large number of branches of the Blood Sea Divine would reached out from the void, grabbing those people. After experiencing the tearing of the endless void cracks just now, everyone's strength was greatly reduced at this moment. In an instant, 5 people were pierced. The 5 venerables tried to self-detonate and drip their blood to be reborn, using their stored power. But at that moment, the Blood King's lips moved slightly. Parasite. 5 clouds of blood mist enveloped the 5 people. Then, the bodies of the 5 people exploded. However, it was just an explosion, not a self-detonation. None of the 5 people succeeded in self-detonating. Poisonous Dragon Bile yelled in horror, oh no, it's those void cracks. There's something wrong with those void cracks. Did you cause them? The Blood King smiled slightly. You only found out now. It's too late. The ability to parasitize is only the most basic ability of our demonic plant clan. However, the more basic it is, the less people want to study it. You don't know how to think at all and don't pursue the true meaning behind simple things. TSK, but I do. So, I'll show you what parasitism is from the body to the soul. I'll let you know the horror of this. Ha ha ha, the Blood King laughed out loud. The temperature of the entire space began to rise rapidly. The sky began to burn, and red leaves were flying all over the sky. Even the poisonous Dragon Bile, a demi-king, was flushed at this moment. The Blood King laughed crazily. I'll show you that wherever there is temperature, there is parasitism. Temperature can breed everything. Han Fei wanted to sneak away from the big snake vine and let the dust fall to the sea. However, like the others, he was also parasitized. Han Fei felt that there was a strange vitality bursting out of the body of the black fog. A power was polluting his power and soul. Yes, it was pollution, or the parasitism that the Blood King mentioned. However, maybe he was not targeting Han Fei, or maybe he had underestimated Han Fei. The moment that power invaded the body of the black fog, it was immediately gnawed by Little Black. Little Black and Little White's characteristics were that they could swallow anything. Therefore, the moment this strange power penetrated the body of the black fog, it was immediately swallowed by Han Fei. Huh. When all the venerables were affected and their bodies collapsed uncontrollably, the Blood King looked at the place where the big snake vine was. Swish, a whip shadow lashed out, and the void collapsed. Seeing that the Blood King was attacking it, the big snake vine immediately drilled into the void. Blood King, you really have bad intentions. Bam, even a high-ranked supremacy shattered along with the void under the Blood King's whip. Before the serpent could drill into the void, a large number of roots chased after it and directly pulled out a divine soul from that piece of flesh. The Blood King chuckled. Everyone, now you can choose to submit to me or die. At the moment when the Blood King laughed out loud, the poisonous Dragon Bile erupted, and the tree lumps on its body burst open one by one. The dark green liquid drilled through the void. With a sizzling sound, wherever the venom flowed, the roots melted. The Blood King's parasitic ability seemed to have been broken. The Blood King didn't pay attention to the poisonous Dragon Bile but said disdainfully, insignificant skill. The Blood King looked at the poisonous Dragon Bile, and a red light flashed in his eyes. With a bang, the poisonous Dragon Bile's head exploded. His body, flesh and blood were broken, and a large number of red roots spurted out like blood. Immediately afterward, a void whip returned with a wisp of soul. Han Fei could even see the ferocious face and howl of the poisonous dragon bile. Under Han Fei's shocked gaze, the old turtle said, "These people are not dead. Their souls are still there. However, they have lost the ability to be reborn from a single drop of blood. Otherwise, in such a short time, heaven's cry would have fallen." Just as the old turtle spoke, a soul sound reverberated in the void, and the poisonous dragon bile shouted, "Blood King, you can corrode living souls, but don't you know that I can also corrode souls? Poison, offer my body." Myriad poison mystique bam. At that moment, within 1,000 kilometers, the void was like a hole, and a large amount of poisonous fog of various colors suddenly seeped out. The Blood King snorted coldly. "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Idiot, can't I parasitize your poison?" Immediately afterward, hundreds of millions of roots descended from the poisonous fog. As the roots withered, the poisonous fog was also rapidly dissipating. In less than 10 minutes, there were no more poisonous things here. Boom, above the sky, the great Tao roared, and a rain of blood poured down. Obviously, among these venerables, the first one to die was also the strongest one among these demon plant venerables. A half-king was like a cripple in the hands of the Blood King. Only at this moment did these demon plants realize how powerful the Blood King was. Sure enough, a master who could be called a false king, even if he never attacked, they had no right to doubt him. Immediately, someone shouted, "Blood King, I'm willing to surrender." When one person surrendered, the others immediately scrambled to be the first. "King, I surrender." "Lord Blood King, I've always admired you." The Blood King's handsome face revealed a trace of evil charm. Only Han Fei could see clearly that these people were also stupid. He said that they could surrender, but he didn't say that he would let them go. The souls of the few people before him have been extracted by this guy. Why don't you hurry up and resist? Are you waiting for him to parasitize your souls? Sure enough, the Blood King looked down at everyone and pondered for a few minutes. Suddenly, he grinned and said, "I." "Then offer your divine souls." Immediately, a peak-level venerable erupted and shouted, "Blood King, you scum, I'd rather die than surrender." "Ha ha ha." The Blood King laughed like a lunatic, took a breath, and said, "Die? Without my permission, do you think you can die?" The Venerables. Chapter 16:15. Before this, Han Fei didn't know that a false king could be so powerful. Although Han Fei had never really confronted a fake king, he had been in contact with the Golden Boy and watched their battles. Han Fei was dumbfounded by his combat power. The Black Killer Snail King, Golden Boy, and even the one from the Demon Beast Alliance were nothing in front of this guy. However, Han Fei was very sure that this person, the Blood King who appeared here, was not a king. The old turtle couldn't help but say, "This person is very talented and strong. Not only is he good at parasitism, but he also seems to have dabbled in the Tao of space." Han Fei thought to himself, "This is the first false king I've ever seen who can fight 36 venerables at the same time." The half-king realm cultivators couldn't even take 2 moves from him before they were crushed to death. The old turtle said, "Don't overestimate this person. After all, he has planned to consume the combat power of these venerables to break through the void chasm of the cage. This person waited at ease for the exhausted to be exhausted, and laid out an inescapable net in advance. That's why these people have nowhere to go to." Because of the delay, half of the venerables present were completely parasitized and had no power to resist at all. Those who could resist were whipped by the void roots and couldn't last more than a few rounds. Clatter, clatter, clatter. The Blood King stretched out his hand, and a big black umbrella with golden light appeared in his hand. The big umbrella opened with a whoosh, and it turned out to have 3 layers. Each layer had 33 dragon bones, skeletons, for a total of 99 dragon bones. At the end of each dragon bone, a small bell hung. At this moment, these little bells were fully lit. Swoosh! 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 The big black umbrella began to spin, and the souls of the venerables enslaved by the Blood King were all sucked into the umbrella. Hula the black umbrella closed. The Blood King grabbed the handle of the umbrella and carried it behind his back. He looked at the world proudly with a smile on his lips. The roots dragged the remains of the demonic plants whose souls had been taken away into the void. The Blood King smiled faintly. Although this king doesn't know who you are, you have some ability to easily sever this king's parasitic powers. I didn't expect you to come, but since you're here, I'm not an unreasonable person. I'll give you a choice. Hand over the earth vein spring water, and this king will allow you to be this king's #1 general. At that moment, Han Fei really wanted to slap this guy in the face. What the hell is this? I am the dignified 9th Immortal Master, a high-level existence who controls the yin-yang sky. How can I become your general? Was there a hole in his brain? The old tortoise reminded him, don't be rash. He's waiting for you to leave. This is his little world. Don't fight him head-on. Han Fei thought to himself, don't worry. I'm not an idiot. The Blood King's perception scanned the world again and again. However, with his abilities, he was still unable to examine every single grain of sand in this world in such a short period of time. Therefore, after more than 10 attempts to no avail, the Blood King had no choice but to give up. She heard him say, I have no choice but to admire you, your concealment ability is really extraordinary. However, it doesn't matter. There is no energy or spiritual energy in this world, and I won't leave a trace of the corpses of these demon plant venerables to you. Since you refuse to come out, just stay in this world. After that, behind the Blood King, a large number of roots stretched out from the void and directly dragged him out of this void. It wasn't until the old tortoise said that there was no threat that Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. However, Han Fei immediately went to forge the universe. Forge the universe. Fuck. Old Yuan, are the demon plants so powerful? The old tortoise said leisurely, what do you think? They are rare. A race that can live many times longer than the tortoise clan. In the age of gods, there has never been a lack of them. They rarely become the strongest, but they are definitely not weak. In some places, there are even demon plants that become supreme existences, and even the emperors of the heavens have to treat them well. Gudu Han Fei once again remembered the first lesson that the water immortal taught him, telling him never to underestimate any demon plant. Han Fei was speechless. He had never paid attention to this problem before. Even when he saw the Cloud Sea divine tree with his own eyes, he felt that they were just unusually tall. In fact, they couldn't transform into human beings, so they shouldn't be so powerful. But now it seemed that he was totally wrong. Han Fei said, the umbrella he used swallowed the souls of so many venerables. It must be a very powerful treasure. The old tortoise said, in fact, I have seen such a kind of rare treasure. Oh. The old tortoise said leisurely, although the types and functions are different, at least one function is certain. All umbrella-type rare treasures have a common characteristic, which is that they have extremely strong defensive power. The strongest emperor I have ever seen is called the Umbrella Emperor. He crossed the sea with an umbrella. That umbrella has many functions. It can block souls, defend against power, break the laws of space, time, and gravity. 9 out of 10. I have no chance of winning against him. Han Fei, hearing the old tortoise's words, Han Fei felt that the old tortoise was flattering him. However, that umbrella did look extraordinary. Otherwise, how could it collect so many souls so casually? Han Fei snorted. The Blood King is extremely arrogant. How dare he not take me seriously after I destroyed one of his clones? Son of a bitch. Han Fei stayed in Forge the Universe for half a month. Half a month of cultivation was equivalent to a day in the outside world. Han Fei's purpose was to wait for the 9 Palace ruler of Providence to recover. However, he couldn't waste time in Forge the Universe, could he? Therefore, Han Fei deduced the Great Desolate Body technique that he had grasped. However, the result of the deduction surprised Han Fei. Ancient Desolate War Body, venerable level, divine quality. Note, an ancient great technique that was passed down in the primitive era. It can attract the evil energy of heaven and earth with a leakless body. In battle, it can absorb other people's fighting intent, hostility, and evil energy. It can grow in battle, make breakthroughs in battle, and strive for glory in battle. Those who practice this technique should have an invincible and fearless heart. This technique can cultivate fighting intent. When the fighting intent is at its strongest, it will help you make a breakthrough. Disadvantage: every battle is crazy deduced art, unknown deduction consumption, 10 wisps of chaotic gas. The cost of this deduction was not small. It was much more expensive than the Great Desolate Body technique. Han Fei deduced all the way from the incomplete monograph on 108 ways of body conditioning to the present, and an ultimate great technique was deduced. Although Han Fei didn't deduce this body tempering technique to the end this time, he was still able to deduce it. However, the pattern of this body tempering technique had changed. It had changed from a pure body tempering technique to a warlike technique. Han Fei studied it for half a month and found that the most powerful thing about this technique was that it could cultivate fighting intent. If he could cultivate enough fighting intent, his combat power would be doubled and he would fight more and more fiercely until he was exhausted and couldn't fight anymore. But the problem was that he couldn't cultivate fighting intent. The most primitive method was to use time to cultivate a mouthful of war qi. There was another seemingly brilliant method, which was to completely follow one's heart and cultivate. This method was a bit mysterious. Han Fei pondered for a while and continued to read. To cultivate this technique, he needed to cultivate fighting awareness, take the initiative to challenge and attack, and then his fighting intent would grow stronger as he fought. Han Fei even saw the most ridiculous way to deal with it: to be beaten. The more he was beaten, the faster his fighting intent would accumulate. Phew, Han Fei took a breath, indicating that he had understood it all, but he had no way to use it. When the time was up, Han Fei measured it with the 9-palace ruler of providence. It was a tie. Han Fei left Forge the Universe boldly. Even though he was relieved, Han Fei still maintained a cautious attitude. He said, "Old Yuan, did you feel any danger?" The old turtle nodded. "No, the Blood King seems to have left." Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei's perception immediately swept this world. Huh? Han Fei was stunned on the spot. Is this the 100,000 mountains? The old tortoise looked confused. However, Han Fei quickly appeared on a hill. Han Fei stood on the top of the mountain and thought to himself, sure enough, this is the 100,000 mountains. The space within the 1,000 mountains ancient realm was only a part of it. And this part of the world was the region where the 100,000 mountains Beast King Valley was located. Han Fei was too familiar with this place. Back then, I followed Tiger and the others to pretend to be beasts, thinking every day about how to escape from Ape Blue and the others' pursuit and escape from the Beast King Valley. Speaking of the 100,000 mountains, there is no place more familiar to me than here. Han Fei immediately scanned with his perception. There were more than 6,000 mountains here, but there were no creatures, not even a plant. Han Fei walked through the mountains, his heart cold. At the bottom of the sea, there were all kinds of fossils. A large number of withered demon plant roots were embedded in the mountain. After searching for a long time, Han Fei didn't find any goods at all. His eyes became cold. Since the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm had survived until now, it was impossible that the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm could not. In the 1,000 Mountains ancient realm, the demonic plants were still contributing their life force to the water immortal. Han Fei gnashed his teeth and said, "Good, good, good. Blood King. There's no way we can conquer this place." Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, what can I do to subdue this place?" The old turtle said unhurriedly, "I'm afraid you don't have the ability to subdue such a large place for now. In theory, there are ways to turn a region into a small world. Otherwise, the experts would store this world in their origin sea. Or an enormous storage space like the sun, moon, and star's shell. However, it was impossible for even the star's shell to contain such a large area. So, It's either the heavenly shell or the expert's origin sea. I can only offer these two ways. Han Fei said gloomily, I mean, how can I subdue it? The old turtle chuckled. If this world is in the heavenly shell, you just need to find the shell. But if the Blood King has the heavenly shell, he can perceive you at any time. So, it can't be in the heavenly shell. So, this place is very likely to be the origin sea of a certain expert. First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 16:16. Han Fei was puzzled by the old turtle's conjecture. He said in a daze, you mean? A king realm expert has put this world into his origin sea? The old turtle nodded. Maybe not yet. There are more than 6,000 mountains here. Even my origin sea can't fit them all. Is there an emperor realm expert in the Waterwood Heaven? If there is, there must be a lot of resources in the Waterwood Heaven. The Blood King doesn't have to spend so much effort to transcend the tribulation. He can just sweep through the Baibei Royal City and the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. There are plenty of resources to help him transcend the tribulation. Han Fei took a breath. So, this space shouldn't be the origin sea of a certain expert? The old turtle nodded. Theoretically, it isn't, but accidents happen occasionally. After all, there are all kinds of strange things in this world. Just like your little gourd, it has infinite magical uses. Who can explain it clearly? Han Fei said, anyway, I have to find a way out. As the Blood King said, if I am trapped here, how can I ruin his plan? Han Fei grabbed the nautical globe and followed the direction of the pointer, wandering among the mountains. In the end, Han Fei came to a mountain that he was familiar with. Huh? Is this the place? Han Fei stood on this protruding mountain for a long time. It was here that the giant king sealed him in a boulder and taught him the swallowing technique to absorb the essence fire of the sun. Later, he used it to practice the indestructible body. At that time, it was so hot that he felt as if he were taking a bath in underground magma. This place was not far from the War Giants, the mountain where the heavenly crystal was located, and the Beast King Valley. Han Fei looked at the nautical globe in his hand and saw that its pointer was just vibrating. Han Fei reached out and pulled out a knife, tearing the void apart. The next moment, Han Fei stepped into the void. He saw a white light source, which seemed to have been waiting there. Because the 9-Palace Destiny Ruler's hexagram was a flat hexagram, Han Fei thought it was just a loophole in space, so he went in without hesitation. As a result, Han Fei appeared in another dark world after he drilled into it. When Han Fei took a closer look, he found that this place, which was less than 1,000 square meters in size, was surrounded by red things. It was as if he was trapped in a sealed wooden space. Before he could study the place, he heard a voice say, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Who? Han Fei was shocked and felt that his blood was freezing. Wasn't it a tie? Wasn't it a spatial hole? Why was he discovered the moment he came out? The old turtle was surprised. My perception has been sealed. The newcomer is very strong. I'm afraid he's a king realm expert. Fuck. The first thing Han Fei thought of was the one in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, which was also what Han Fei and the old turtle guessed, the reincarnation of the Blood King. Therefore, in an instant, as if facing a formidable enemy, Han Fei pushed the power of the Great Way to the extreme without hesitation. Once he was defeated, he planned to stay and forge the universe and never come out. However, in the darkness, a strange person with the head of a goat and the tail of a fox slowly walked out. When Han Fei saw him, he was dumbfounded. Divine Son. Han Fei would never mistake him for someone else. This person had 2 horns on his head, which were pointing backward. His hair, eyebrows, and beard were all very long, but he looked extremely young. On his shoulders, there were bone spurs protruding from the flesh and blood, like 2 small wings in front of his body. A pair of gray wings were folded behind him, and a long tail was casually dragging on the ground. This was exactly the same as the Divine Son he had seen before. Oh, no, there was something different. At that time, the divine son was made of flesh and blood. But the body of the divine son in front of him was a plant. The appearances he saw were all transformed from the body of a demonic plant. Han Fei immediately narrowed his eyes and said, "You are not the divine son." "Who are you?" The divine son said lightly, "My path is broken. Therefore, I have no hope of becoming a king for life." But when the beast king was going through the tribulation, the giant king and the heavenly crystal died on the spot. I burned my divine veins to stop the king. In the end, my divine veins were exhausted. I abandoned my divine veins and reopened the path of the demonic plant clan. After cultivating for 60,000 years, absorbing the essence of heaven and earth, I finally became a king. The divine son said these words calmly and explained the ins and outs of the matter. If Han Fei had heard this description for the first time, he might have been confused. However, this was the second time he had heard this. The first time, it was the water deity who told him. At that time, the water deity told him that the divine son stopped the king alone and his whereabouts were unknown. Han Fei remembered these words clearly, word for word. Han Fei narrowed his eyes. "Who am I?" "Wang Han." Han Fei was in a black fog at the moment. Ordinary people couldn't find him at all, such as the Blood King. Even if the divine son became a king, how could he see through Han Fei's real body? Han Fei asked, "How do you know it's me?" The divine son said, "Because the place you came from has the aura you once left." The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. "It's been so long. Can it still exist?" The divine son said, "It existed before. This is a fact that can't be erased. Anything, as long as it existed, can be found in time." Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, "Is the path you walk related to time?" The divine son nodded. "Yes and no. I've walked several paths, and the avenue of time is only one of them. But this path is extremely difficult to figure out. The most I can do is to find a trace of historical remains from the gaps of history." "Then do you know what happened after you switched to the demonic plant clan?" The divine son shook his head. "When I woke up, it was already thousands of years later. As a tree, it took me 20,000 years to cultivate my consciousness. 30,000 years to recover my memory, 50,000 years to return to the peak of my strength, and 60,000 years to become a king." "A tree?" "Wow," Han Fei's eyelids twitched and he said in shock, "Don't tell me your name is the Blood Sea Divine Wood. My little heart can't take this blow." However, the divine son nodded slightly. "Congratulations, you guessed it." Han Fei was shocked. "No. Then, if you are the Blood Sea Divine Wood, then what about the Blood King? What about the endless millennium snappers in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City? What's with the dense forest of Big Red Trunk?" Questions popped up in Han Fei's mind one after another. What kind of joke was this? The divine son became the Blood Sea Divine Wood? How could he believe such an absurd and bizarre thing? The divine son said, "Don't worry. There's still a lot of time. I can answer your questions slowly." The divine son waved his hand, and a table and a wine cup appeared in front of him. In the cup, there was the earth vein spring that Han Fei had just robbed. It seemed to be deliberately shown to Han Fei. The divine son said, "First of all, ask the question you want to ask the most." Han Fei was about to open his mouth, but then he stopped and asked, "Why can your origin sea accommodate such a large area of the 100,000 mountains?" The divine son smiled. "Because I have divinity. Even if I abandon the divine heritage, it doesn't mean I have nothing." The old turtle was shocked. "If that's the case, I really have nothing to say. If he is really the son of a god, it doesn't seem very difficult for him to have an origin sea that contains more than 6,000 mountains." The divine son smiled. "You're right and wrong. If he isn't the son of a god, he can't have such a large origin sea. My origin sea is the result of me devouring more and more energy and spiritual energy, causing my cultivation path to deviate from its original path. Just like the Cloud Sea Divine Tree, his origin sea can't be small. Han Fei's eyes widened, and the old turtle exclaimed, "He can hear me. His soul is comparable to that of an emperor." The Divine Son shook his head again. "It's not that my soul is comparable to that of an emperor, but that you are too weak. Your soul is incomplete. Even if your realm is very high, it is incomplete after all." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Okay, let's not talk about this. Let me continue." "Okay." The Divine Son drank a cup of Earth Vein Spring and waited for Han Fei's question calmly. Han Fei immediately asked, "Is there a reincarnation of the Blood King?" The Divine Son nodded. "Yes." Han Fei asked, "Is that reincarnation going to transcend a tribulation?" The Divine Son nodded. "Are you helping him transcend a tribulation?" The Divine Son nodded. "Yes." Han Fei asked, "Why?" The Divine Son looked at Han Fei seriously. "Because I was parasitized by him." "Huh?" Han Fei was stunned. "What do you mean you were parasitized by him? You are a king, but you were parasitized by a half-king? Is this a joke?" The Divine Son knew that Han Fei was puzzled, so he said slowly, "The reincarnation of the Blood King is called Xue Fan. He appeared here 30,000 years ago. At that time, I had already become a king, but the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua hadn't. When Xue Fan was sent here, he was already dying. I saw that his demonic heritage was extraordinary, so I took him in. His original body was the big red trunk you saw, but he was not like those you saw. He was the strongest talent of this clan. It only took him 1,000 years to cultivate to the half-king realm. Until Xue Fan became a half-king, his temperament was not bad, and he was always very gentle, staying with me. Until he faced the King Tribulation, the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua passed the King Tribulation one after another. When it was his turn, the Heavenly Tribulation didn't come, and the spiritual energy and energy here were no longer enough to support him to become a king. Gradually, his heart began to twist, and he intended to win a chance for himself to become a king through alternative methods. So, he chose to blossom and bear fruit. The fruit was called the Red Ball, the second chapter. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 16-17. As the Divine Son, who was now the Blood Sea Divine Wood, spoke, Han Fei had completely believed that the Blood Sea Divine Wood was the Divine Son. Han Fei even tested it with the navigator in his heart. The navigator was indeed pointing at the wood-like Divine Son in front of him. According to the Divine Son's description, this Blood King was not a bad guy. It was just that he was too talented. His pride made him unable to accept the reality that he couldn't become a king. Therefore, he became cruel and his mind became active. He believed that the energy in the world was completely enough for him to become a king. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen could become kings because they had absorbed enough energy of heaven and earth and must have absorbed a lot of chaotic chi. In addition to the chaotic chi, these two people had one characteristic, which was that they were the leaders of a race. Therefore, Xue Fan also wanted to become the leader of a race. Therefore, he created a race alone, which was the Millennium Snapper. Even though these Millennium Snappers were transformed from other creatures. After the transformation, they became his clansmen. Only when they believed in him would they be bestowed with more and become stronger. Xue Fan knew that he couldn't make any mistakes in his tribulation this time. Therefore, he chose to recultivate for the second time. Yes, this guy completely gave up his half-king realm power and recultivated from scratch. However, this recultivation was not a casual recultivation. He knew that the Shuemu heaven could only provide him with limited space. Even though he had already found all the resources for himself from the beginning to the end. However, he still couldn't rest assured. At this point, he found that there had always been a strong master around him. A Blood Sea Divine Wood that had become a king before the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. Therefore, Xue Fan turned his attention to the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Han Fei could understand that in the 100,000 mountains, everyone acted according to their nature. Xue Fan, in addition to creating the Red Ball, relatively speaking, he just wanted to become stronger at that time. And the divine son had always been a bit arrogant, and he often regarded himself as a god. How could a god think of intervening or killing people? After all, at that time, Xue Fan hadn't become a king yet. All below the king level were ants. This was not nonsense. If the divine son had wanted to kill Xue Fan at that time, Xue Fan wouldn't have survived. However, it was precisely because of the god's attitude that Xue Fan had an opportunity to take advantage of. He used his original body to plant new seeds, saying that he wanted to guard the Blood Sea divine tree. He built this place into a kingdom. Since then, Xue Fan had been secretly researching the parasitic Tao. It took him more than 20,000 years to change the temperature around the Blood Sea divine wood, bit by bit, quietly. What really allowed the Blood King to successfully parasitize was when the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua joined forces to attack the Blood Sea divine wood city. Back then, it was not because Xue Fan was able to defeat the two of them. The main reason was that the god's son had intervened. As for Xue Fan, he took advantage of the god's son's attack to activate the parasitism that he had been accumulating for 20,000 years. According to the divine son, the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua's attack on the Blood Sea divine wood city might have been orchestrated by Xue Fan. Xue Fan had waited 20,000 years for the day he could become a parasite. When the divine prince finished his story, Han Fei was shocked. Damn it, this guy is definitely a ruthless man. Xue Fan was really a very inspiring evil demon. He had brought evil to a certain level. This guy was too heartless. The divine prince had helped him a lot, but in the end, he was used by him. Han Fei took a deep breath. So now, he has your power. The divine prince shook his head. Yes and no. After all, when he parasitized me, he was not a king. I retained part of the origin, so he couldn't find it before he became a king. I did leave a few backup plans, but he had already destroyed 2 of them. Han Fei's eyes widened. He even predicted your backup plans? The divine prince said leisurely, as soon as he launched the parasite, I was fighting with the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua. During this time, I established a connection with Mu Wuhua. Later, I began to communicate with Mu Wuhua with the power of the earth veins. However, Xue Fan was also a demonic plant. He soon discovered that something was wrong with the earth veins. So, he sowed many more big red trunks. Now, hundreds of thousands of kilometers around me are all under his control. Han Fei asked, what about the other backup plan? There was a trace of anger in the divine prince's eyes. That's my origin sea. Because I intended to send demonic plants to Mu Wuhua, Xue Fan tracked me down and sneaked into the origin sea, causing most of the demonic plants and some ordinary demonic beasts here to die. At that time, I consumed part of the origin and seriously injured him. And because I couldn't use much power, that part of the origin was also devoured by him. Han Fei listened to all this as if he was listening to a book from heaven. It was not an exaggeration to say that the contest between a half-king and a king for tens of thousands of years was wonderful. The divine prince looked at Han Fei. When I found that I could no longer stop it, I didn't expose myself anymore and waited for you, Han Fei asked. Oh? You knew I would show up. The divine prince said, when Mu Wuhua discussed countermeasures with me, he once mentioned a place called the Yin-Yang Heaven, where islands were suspended in the air. You should know that, not long after you left the Age of Doom, the secret of the floating stone was discovered. This made us realize that a new era was coming. And you should be born in this new era. So, I was waiting for you. Although the divine prince said it lightly, Han Fei felt that the divine prince should be panicking. Because he came too late, and he didn't come until Xue Fan was about to go through the tribulation. Moreover, he had come here by a freak combination of factors. It could be imagined that with Xue Fan's character, once he became a king and had enough strength, the first thing he would take down would be the Blood Sea divine wood, that is, the divine prince. Only in that way could he consolidate his position. And if he completely devoured the power of a king, it could be imagined how strong Xue Fan would be at that time. The old tortoise couldn't help but sigh. This person really should have entered the crooked path. He has perseverance, courage, strategy, courage. If he succeeds, I'm afraid that his achievements will not be low. If he becomes a king, the water-wood heaven and the yin-yang heaven will be his sooner or later. Han Fei remembered that the Blood Sea Divine Wood City never participated in the battle between the Baibei Royal City and the Waterwood Heaven. Only then did he understand that it was not that they didn't fight, but that they were fighting for the big world. As the saying goes, there is peace before the storm. The one who survived to the end was the king. This sentence was so appropriate for Xue Fan. Han Fei took a breath. Then what should I do now? The Divine Prince said, you should have your own independent small world, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have completely disappeared from my origin sea, and even I couldn't find you. Also, with your current body, if you weren't in my origin sea, I might not have been able to find you. Han Fei said, Xue Fan won't find me, will he? The Divine Prince shook his head. Although he can parasitize me, he is not me after all. He can force some choices for me, but he can't feel my feelings. In short, he hasn't become a king yet, and the path of parasitism hasn't reached a higher level. Once he becomes a king, he may completely devour my soul and turn me into his incarnation. Son of a bitch, Han Fei murmured, thinking, Xue Fan's wishful thinking is too obvious. Han Fei asked, then where are we now? The Divine Prince replied, in my absolute domain. This is the only place that Xue Fan hasn't discovered so far. Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. What are you going to do? The Divine Prince smiled slightly. What are you going to do? What I can do now is very limited. However, I can forcibly take back control of my body in a short time. But this time won't be long. And once I do this, my domain will be discovered. Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, Master Divine Prince, where are his resources? Tell me his location, and I'll steal everything he has. The Divine Prince glanced at Han Fei and said leisurely, a few months ago, from the moment you ruined his plan in the cage below, all his resources have been collected by yourself. He didn't put any of them outside. Han Fei, why is he so cautious? Han Fei was immediately speechless. However, he could understand that a person who could plan for tens of thousands of years to transcend a tribulation naturally wouldn't let his 10,000 years of planning go to waste because of such a trivial matter. Han Fei said, when is he going to transcend the tribulation? Or, how is he going to transcend the tribulation? In this so-called absolute domain, Han Fei and the Divine Prince chatted for a long time. In fact, what the Divine Prince could do was indeed limited, but he knew a lot of information. From beginning to end, the Divine Prince never mentioned the water fairy, nor did Han Fei. Although it was very likely that the Divine Prince also knew that the water fairy had something to do with Mu Wuhua, Han Fei was worried. If things didn't work out, he couldn't let Xue Fan know these secrets through the Divine Prince. So, why did he mention the water fairy? Half a day later. When Han Fei quietly left this so-called absolute domain, he had already quietly appeared in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. However, what he saw in front of him was a prosperous scene. Han Fei found that this turned out to be a country where humans were hiding. Oh, no, to be precise, it was a country where the Millennium Snappers had transformed into humans and lived. The point was, it was all fucking women, not a single man. Their clothes. Han Fei couldn't bear to look at them. Fuck. Don't look. Female skeletons, all skeletons. Third night. Asking for votes. Moi, end of this chapter. Chapter 16-18. The Divine Prince was still alive. Although he had cultivated himself into a tree, Han Fei was still very happy. However, Han Fei really couldn't make up his mind about Xue Fan's tribulation. Han Fei's first thought was to find the Life Queen, preferably with the White Armor Emperor. How could he bring the White Armor Emperor along? It was none of Han Fei's business. In any case, he had to inform them of this matter. Although they would definitely know when Xue Fan was going through his tribulation. However, knowing in advance and being passively aware were two different things. Secondly, the Divine Son had told him that the umbrella in Xue Fan's hand contained more than 300 venerable realm experts' souls. That umbrella was used to resist the heavenly tribulation. According to the Divine Prince's estimation, that thing could withstand 3 heavenly tribulations. At that moment, Han Fei felt terrible. Xue Fan was obviously not going through the 6th tribulation, but the 9th tribulation. However, it was simply unimaginable that a single weapon could block 3 heavenly tribulations. In fact, Han Fei quite admired Xue Fan's ruthlessness. In these tens of thousands of years, Xue Fan had secretly swallowed over 300 of them. Those were all experts that fellow had raised himself. In the end, if a bunch of leaks were cut down, those supremacies would probably be dumbfounded. Furthermore, when Xue Fan was devouring them, he had found all sorts of reasons to draw them away so that others would not suspect him. It could be said that most of the people in the Blood Sea Sacred Wood City believed in him and did not doubt him at all. From this, one could see how treacherous Xue Fan was. As a matter of fact, this was the first time that Han Fei had seen an evil king. This was much better than a king like the White Armor Emperor who only knew how to fight. What Han Fei appeared at this moment was the core of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, an area between the seawater and the seabed, surrounded by tall big red trunk, many of which grew around the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Most of the people living here were explorers. According to the Divine Son, Xue Fan had purposely set the living standards to be so strict. Venerables had their own residences, and every level of explorer also had their own residences. Yi Long was at the peak of a beginner explorer and was about to become an intermediate explorer. Because of her outstanding talent and combat ability, she was the pride of the beginner explorers. Yi Long loved to fight and had gone out to fight a few times over the years. Her methods were becoming more and more extraordinary. After his true nature as a prodigy was discovered, he participated in 7 consecutive hunts and emerged victorious. At that moment, Yi Long was on his way home. Many people greeted her when they saw her. Someone grinned. "Lord Yi Long, are you back from your cultivation?" Yi Long replied indifferently, "Yes." Someone said, "Sister Long, when will you take me to the battlefield? I heard that it's a place for rapid growth." Yi Long's expression did not change. "I'm free." Someone stretched out a slender hand and slid it across Yi Long's waist. Her eyes were as clear as the autumn water, and her red lips parted slightly. "Long, come to my residence tonight for a chat. I have some cultivation insights, and I would like to discuss them with you." Yi Long frowned slightly. She was a little unhappy and even snorted softly to express her dissatisfaction. With a cold and aloof attitude, he circled around these people and quickly found a tree burl. He opened the seal with familiarity and crawled inside. "Who?" Yi Long's brows relaxed. Although she had lived here for a long time, she still couldn't accept the open gay community life in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. She couldn't remember how many times she had been dragged into someone else's cave. Just when Yi Long was about to clear her mind and enter cultivation, a voice suddenly sounded in her mind, "Fish Dragon King, it seems that you have a good life in this Blood Sea Divine Wood City. You are very happy." The Fish Dragon King trembled all over and finally stretched his body, whispering, "How did you get in?" Han Fei was not afraid that his words would be heard by Xue Fan. Although he already knew that all the Millennium Snappers were parasitized by Xue Fan, so what? Parasitism didn't mean that he could completely know all the senses and thoughts of these billions of Millennium Snappers. When there were more people, the words and thoughts produced would become messy. In order not to affect the normal life and cultivation of the Millennium Snappers, the parasitism would usually not be activated. Besides, there was the barrier of the old Turtle Emperor's soul and his 9-palace ruler of Providence, which ensured the safety of his actions. Han Fei said leisurely, "It doesn't matter how I got in. What's important is that you have something to do now." The Fish Dragon King's expression changed many times, thinking, "I still can't get rid of Han Fei after all. In the past few years, she had changed her appearance and became a heavenly talent again, admired by countless people. However, as soon as Han Fei appeared, she felt that all these were just illusions and unrealistic. The Fish Dragon King asked, "What is it?" Han Fei said, "Help me send something out of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. After this is done, your mission will be completed. I will never come to you again. You are free." The Fish Dragon King was shocked. "Really?" Han Fei chuckled. "Why, are you still not willing?" The Fish Dragon King took a breath and said, "You spent so much effort to send me in just to let me go out and send something out of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City?" A sun-moon shell floated in front of the Fish Dragon King, and Han Fei said leisurely, "I spent so much effort to get you in. That's my business." That was the way it was. You could do it or not do it. You can even give the thing I give you to Xue Fan when you go out. It's up to you. The Fish Dragon King was puzzled. Who is Xue Fan? Han Fei was stunned for a moment and then chuckled. You don't even know the king of your Blood Sea Divine Wood City? You are really weak. The Fish Dragon King's heart also sank. I have never seen a king in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City for so many years. How did Han Fei know? Besides, how did Han Fei sneak in? And he can't even see a person. The Fish Dragon King certainly knew that she was no match for Han Fei. As early as in the beginning, Han Fei no longer regarded explorers as opponents. Now, he even dared to plot against a king. What couldn't this guy do? Although the Fish Dragon King still hated Han Fei in her heart, she didn't dare to disobey him at this moment. She said, "Are you sure? After doing this, you will let me go completely?" A bead appeared. When the Ichthyosaur King saw the blood bead, his heart skipped a beat. That was his own blood essence. Han Fei just threw it to her so casually. Han Fei said, "For me, you are too weak. You are no longer qualified to be my pawn. Give me this and I will set you free." Gulp. The Fish Dragon King swallowed, and her eyes became firmer. To whom? After a while, the Fish Dragon King left the house and went to a small tree burl. She knocked on it casually, and then a cute little fish head popped out. "Sister Long." "Yeah, do you want to go to the frontline battlefield?" The value of the Fish Dragon King was so great. In the sun-moon shell, Han Fei put a puppet corpse. It was just that Han Fei had placed a wisp of his soul in this corpse. As long as the Fish Dragon King sent it out quietly, she would find a way to leave. What Han Fei really wanted was not the Fish Dragon King. It was already a great honor for the Fish Dragon King to be a courier. On the other side, on the edge of a tree city a little far from the Blood Sea Divine Wood, there was a circle of tall big red trunk. There were tens of millions of Millennium Snappers cultivating here. In this city, almost half of the city was still selling various items and resources. Usually, this was a market that would only appear in a civilized society. But for different races, especially strange races like the Millennium Snappers, it was quite novel for them to appear in this kind of place. But here, there was a large shop named Idle Cloud Pawn Shop. Bam, a person was directly kicked out of the pawn shop, and it was a peak-level law Millennium Snapper. Immediately afterward, a woman came out of the pawn shop and said in a cold voice, "The pawn shop has its own rules. If you don't have enough resources to exchange, or if you exceed the prescribed time, you will be killed. Your things no longer belong to you." The Millennium Snapper who was kicked out trembled with anger. What a human! Don't wait for me to find an opportunity. Otherwise, I will not let you go. Humph! After the man left, at the door of the pawn shop, behind the woman, a woman said, "Ruoyun, there are still too few people on our side. Even if you are a heavenly talent and have become an intermediate explorer, you can't spend all your time in our territory." Yang Ruoyun said lightly, "I understand. When I become the Venerable One, no one will come to our territory to make trouble." After a while, Yang Ruoyun had just returned to the pawn shop, preparing to cultivate directly behind the pawn shop. In this way, it would be more convenient for her to take care of the territory. Suddenly, a voice came into her mind. I have a deal, which may be the biggest deal since you opened the pawn shop, or since you turned into a demon. Are you interested? Who is it? Yang Ruoyun suddenly opened her eyes and looked in all directions. The surroundings were blocked by prohibitions. Who could directly send a voice transmission to her? Han Fei said leisurely, What? I gave you a few big gifts and the head of the Fish Dragon King, and you forgot me? It's you. As early as the battle on the island, she knew that Han Fei's strength had crushed her in all aspects. However, Han Fei gave her several big benefits in a row. After all, she was also confused. She didn't know what Han Fei's purpose was. At this moment, Han Fei's appearance even untied the knot in her heart. Yang Ruoyun's reaction was calmer than the Fish Dragon King's. She and Han Fei had made deals more than once or twice. In the past, she cheated him a lot. But now, she had been led by Han Fei. Yang Ruoyun said calmly, Where are you? Han Fei said, Don't worry about where I am. I just want to ask you, do you want to make this deal or not? If you do, you need to swear to the Tao. Yang Ruoyun's eyes narrowed slightly. What deal? First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 16-19. Han Fei didn't prepare much in advance. He only had 2 chess pieces in total, and he had used both of them. As for the rest, he would have to make it himself. Han Fei didn't expect Xue Fan to take action so soon. After all, Xue Fan had just killed so many monster plant venerables. He shouldn't be going through the tribulation now. At the very least, you have to refine it, right? However, on the 3rd day, when Han Fei was wandering in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City, suddenly, venerables ran amok. On the way, he saw a lot of Millennium Snappers returning from outside the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. Then, the voice of the Venerable echoed in the surroundings, A Grand Monarch is going through the Monarch Tribulation in the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. From today onwards, no one is allowed to enter or leave. All of you, immediately stop what you are doing and begin your seclusion. Once the heavenly tribulation descends, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will converge. This is a rare opportunity that only appears once in 10,000 years. All the Millennium Snappers below the venerable level in the divine city of Blood Sea were shocked. What? King's tribulation? Which grand monarch is this? Is he trying to transcend tribulation and become a monarch? What? Is our Blood Sea Divine Wood City going to welcome our 3rd king? Hiss. Quickly, return to the residence and cultivate. Such a golden opportunity couldn't be missed. Who knows, today might be the day we break through. Not to mention someone going through the king's tribulation, even if someone became a venerable, it would be extremely rare for ordinary people to see them. Most of the Millennium Snappers were like caged fish. He lived his entire life on the territory of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City that he could see. These people were easily fooled, but Han Fei was not stupid. He exclaimed in shock, No way. Didn't this person need to prepare for his monarch tribulation? Breaking through already? Is he playing? The old tortoise said, There's something even more unexpected. Do you know where he went through his tribulation? Han Fei wondered, Where? The old turtle said, Right above the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. He might not be afraid of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. This meant that he was confident that he had completely parasitized the Blood Sea Divine Wood. He regarded the Blood Sea Divine Wood as his outer body incarnation. Ha! What an arrogant and conceited fellow. Let's go. Let's go take a look. Outside the Blood Sea Sacred Wood City, the Fish Dragon King realized that it could not return. The Blood Sea Divine Wood City was sealed as if something big had happened. The Fish Dragon King didn't dare to say anything, so it just stayed outside. As long as it could stay away from the Forbidden Land, Han Fei could do whatever he wanted. After that, it would go back and be a top heavenly talent. Compared to the Ichthyosaur King, Yang Ruoyun was the one who was really scared. She knew that Han Fei would make trouble, but she didn't expect that Han Fei would make such a big one. Han Fei suddenly appeared, and a Grand Master was going to transcend the king's tribulation. Is Han Fei powerful enough to interfere with the king's tribulation? Beside Yang Ruoyun, a few followers were still exclaiming in shock. Yang Ruoyun said, "Quick, finish what you're doing and go back into seclusion." Back in the waterwood sky, everyone knew that tribulation transcendence couldn't be done on the Cloud Sea Divine Tree. However, Xue Fan was undergoing his tribulation in the sky. The old tortoise naturally wouldn't lie to him, so what was the reason? "Old Yuan, since the Divine Prince can meet me, it means that he's still alive. If Xue Fan transcends his tribulation in this way, isn't he courting death?" But the old tortoise was silent for a moment and said, "Not necessarily." Han Fei's face changed. "What's going on?" The old tortoise explained, "As normal people know, half-kings and pseudo-kings are all venerables, and it's impossible for venerables to challenge kings. However, things are not absolute. For example, those with particularly strong talents and bloodlines can also kill kings. This proves that the so-called kings are only in the sea expansion realm. It doesn't mean that those below the sea expansion realm are invincible. As for people like Xue Fan, he has been cultivating with sorcery for tens of thousands of years. Although he has not been able to completely replace the Blood Sea Divine Tree, his great Tao is special. His body is most likely fused with the Blood Sea Divine Tree. The heavenly tribulations may also misjudge," Han Fei gasped. "The heavenly tribulation misjudge? Do you mean that he can ask the Divine Prince to help him resist the heavenly tribulation? Are you kidding me? The Divine Prince has become a king, and a king can resist the venerable heavenly tribulation? Isn't that easy?" In a moment, the two had reached the top of the Blood Sea Divine Tree. During this period, Han Fei carefully avoided contact with everything around him. Xue Fan was a parasite and his comprehensive strength was not weak at all. Most of the things that Han Fei saw were parasites of him. Whether it was the Millennium Snapper, the Big Red Trunk, or the Blood Sea Divine Tree, everything here seemed to be dominated by Xue Fan. When Han Fei came out of the sea and saw the sky, he only saw raging waves within 10,000 kilometers. Above the sky, thunder was roaring. The clouds were rolling, and the lightning was like dragons. It looked like the end of the world. Xue Fan stood in the air, looking down at the sky. Around him, a big black umbrella was spinning. Han Fei's heart sank. Is this guy really going to transcend the tribulation now? Han Fei was uneasy. It was too fast. All his arrangements might not work. Xue Fan had already transcended the tribulation. Didn't he need to prepare at all? Or had he been preparing for tens of thousands of years? Rumble, about an hour later, the heavenly tribulation seemed to be almost ready. The lightning in the sky was getting stronger and stronger. Xue Fan smiled and even looked down. Then he turned his head and shouted, "Tribulation is coming." Seriously? Han Fei was speechless. This son of a bitch was really going to transcend the tribulation. This was completely beyond Han Fei's expectation. It was probably beyond the Divine Prince's expectation too. Crack, 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 the lightning in the sky seemed to be gathering. Boom, phew, Xue Fan reached out to the sky and hundreds of millions of roots formed a cage, locking himself in it. Crack, the thick lightning directly enveloped Xue Fan. Only at this moment did Han Fei realize that Xue Fan had really started. He wondered if the Fish Dragon King could make it in time. The first lightning was the least powerful. Han Fei could only see the lightning arcs penetrating into Xue Fan's body through the broken cage. He was clad in a blood-red battle suit and armor. Beneath Xue Fan's feet, a large, round ball wrapped in wood had appeared at an unknown time. His roots were all in that ball. Xue Fan reached out to resist the first lightning. His armor wasn't broken, his blood didn't bleed, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. The old turtle couldn't help but say, "This man is too powerful. I'm afraid that the heavenly tribulation may not be able to kill him." Han Fei rolled his eyes. Just say that you think this guy can survive the heavenly tribulation. I know he's extraordinary, but that's one thing. Right now, we have to think about how to destroy him. A lightning fell. 2 lightning bolts rose. In the second lightning bolt, Xue Fan was still safe. Han Fei saw that cracks appeared on Xue Fan's fingers. This meant that Xue Fan also had a limit. However, Xue Fan didn't care at all. He didn't even use the big black umbrella. Facing the third lightning bolt, Xue Fan raised his hand and 4 vines stretched out from the void and whipped the sky. After completing this action, Xue Fan actually opened his arms and embraced the thunderbolts. Above the void, there was a wild roar. Xue Fan laughed proudly. The heavenly tribulation will strengthen my body. 30,000 years ago, you didn't come to the last tribulation. I'd like to see. Will you come today? If you don't come today, I will forcibly become a king. What can you do? Boom, the lightning bolts fell, but Xue Fan didn't step back at all. Electric arcs flashed on his body and cracks appeared on his battle suit. Han Fei didn't know if it was because his foundation was too strong. 3 consecutive lightning bolts didn't even push him back half a step. Seeing this scene, Han Fei couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh my god! Just how strong is this fellow?" The old turtle said, "Each heavenly tribulation is stronger than the last." In the age of immortals, there were many peerless heavenly talents who could withstand lightning bolts with their bodies. Not to mention 3, there are even some who have endured 6. Han Fei asked, "Are you talking about me?" The old turtle said, "You didn't withstand it either. The third one, and your body was blown apart." Han Fei didn't feel good at all. He wanted to say, "At that time, I was only an intermediate venerable and hadn't reached the peak. How could I be the same as now?" However, Han Fei recalled that if he went up now, he would only be able to withstand 3 lightning bolts at most. But then, Xue Fan's strength refreshed Han Fei's view. The 4th lightning bolt, and Xue Fan's battle suit was shattered. The 5th lightning bolt, and Xue Fan was hit on the top of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. With the support of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, a large amount of earth vein spring flowed into his body, and Xue Fan quickly recovered. This guy really took 2 more lightning bolts with his body. At this moment, the big ball that the roots of Xue Fan's feet pierced was still intact. More importantly, the Divine Prince said that Xue Fan's big black umbrella that could withstand 3 lightning bolts hadn't been used yet. When Xue Fan endured 5 lightning bolts in a row, Han Fei couldn't sit still anymore. The white mist activated the 9 Palace Providence ruler in Forge the Universe. As a result, the ruler fell on the word, desperate. How long had it been? He was in a desperate situation again. Han Fei took a breath and threw 3 strands of chaotic energy into it, trying to change his luck. However, after the 3 strands of chaotic energy entered the Providence ruler, they didn't even make a ripple. At this moment, the 6th lightning bolt fell, and Xue Fan's upper arm was blown into pieces, and his body was split in half. Han Fei knew that he couldn't wait any longer. What earth vein? This guy didn't need to rely on the earth vein to sustain himself at all. He had survived until now with only his body. This meant that if Xue Fan could survive 1 more lightning bolt, with the help of the big black umbrella, he would probably pass the king's tribulation. How could Han Fei let this happen? Immediately, all 10 strands of chaotic energy were stuffed into the 9 Palace Providence ruler. At this moment, the 9 Palace Providence ruler finally changed the desperate situation into the impermanent hexagram. Han Fei's heart sank. Once he entered the impermanent state, the hexagram was irreversible. It seemed that the only way to change the desperate situation hexagram was to change it into impermanent. During the whole process, the old turtle was watching and seemed to be thinking about something. Seeing that Han Fei seemed to be desperate, the old turtle said, "Han Fei, do you want to wait a little longer? I feel that it's a bit strange." Second. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1620. What are we waiting for? If we wait any longer, he'll become a king. The next bolt of lightning was about to appear. The void shook, and a green vine swept across the sky. On the other side, a giant shell flew across the sky. The giant shell opened its mouth, and the void collapsed as it charged at the tribulation. The two kings attacked at the same time, their power overwhelming, as if the sea was overturned. Angry waves rolled up thousands of meters, and vines and roots intertwined in the sky. The two kings attacked at the same time. The White Armor Emperor tried to interfere with Xue Fan, who was undergoing the tribulation. The Life Queen attacked the branches of the Blood Sea Divine Wood in the void, and at the same time, her roots swept for thousands of miles and directly pierced into the earth veins within the Blood Sea Divine Wood city. Seeing this scene, Han Fei was greatly relieved. It seemed that the Fish Dragon King had done a good job. In the puppet that the Fish Dragon King sent out, Han Fei only told the Life Queen the simplest operation: work with the White Armor Emperor to destroy the earth veins first, then stop the King tribulation. But although the Life Queen's first thing was to destroy the earth veins, they were obviously a bit late. After all, when they arrived, Xue Fan had already begun his tribulation. At this time, it was a battle between the three kings, and Han Fei wasn't ready to take action. Han Fei thought that the Nine Palace Destiny ruler would predict that he would take action. However, if he didn't take action, he would just be a spectator. Han Fei somewhat regretted the 13 streams of chaotic energy that he had given her. The old turtle said, "Don't be happy too early. Your goal hasn't been fully achieved. They're still too late. Even if you didn't inform them, the two of them should have arrived by now. Someone is undergoing the King tribulation. As kings, it's impossible for them not to sense it. They just didn't expect that Xue Fan would be undergoing the tribulation right above the Blood Sea Divine Wood." Han Fei's face was gloomy. His original plan was actually very clear. Xue Fan had been managing the earth veins of the Blood Sea Divine Wood city for many years. Hence, regardless of whether it was the Ichthyosaur King's message, or borrowing the power of Yang Ruoyan's human converts, or even his 2 days of wandering around the Blood Sea's sacred wood city, it was all to destroy Xue Fan's advantage of the earth meridians. Once the earth veins were broken, the divine sun turned around to fight back, and the two monarchs arrived. Han Fei couldn't figure it out. Without the help of a king, how could Xue Fan survive the tribulation and become a king all by himself? At this moment, high up in the sky, Xue Fan seemed to have gone crazy. He was enraged and laughed maniacally. "The two of you, do you think you can deal with me like this? When I become a king, the two of you will perish. Patriarch Blood Sea, take action." As Mu Wuhua destroyed the earth veins in a frenzy, he said, "Attack." At that moment, Xue Fan ordered the Blood Sea Divine Wood to attack. As for the White Armor Emperor, he thought that Mu Wuhua was asking him to make a move. He thought to himself, "I'm making a move now." Bang, bang, bang. However, in the next moment, within a range of 100,000 li, at least 100 earth veins erupted. Roots suddenly surged, breaking through the waves and sweeping through the great red trunk forest. On Xue Fan's side, he had already entered the tribulation. However, he never expected that the Blood Sea Divine Wood would actually move at this moment. Unexpectedly, the Blood Sea Divine Wood was also unscrupulously destroying things. However, although the Blood Sea Divine Wood was destroying, it didn't attack Xue Fan. Therefore, the White Armor Emperor thought that the Life Queen had done something to the Blood Sea Divine Wood. At this time, the White Armor Emperor hesitated. Is the Life Queen already so powerful? Has she already extended her hand to the Blood Sea Divine Wood city? Boom! The seventh bolt of lightning fell. Xue Fan's fingers cracked, and he shouted, "Parasite!" At that moment, a blood-colored scroll appeared in Xue Fan's hand. With a flip of the scroll, 100,000 living souls appeared in the sky. At this moment, Xue Fan finally used other means. Moreover, Xue Fan's attack was too ruthless. One strike was 100,000 living souls. The living souls that could last for so long must at least be experts in the law enforcer realm. With just one bolt of lightning, 100,000 living souls were instantly annihilated. Xue Fan grabbed the branch of the Blood Sea Divine Wood and shouted, "What's the use of betraying me now?" Xue Fan grinned hideously. "I bet that the two of you don't dare to enter my tribulation. It's over." Xue Fan's body exploded, but it quickly spun and gathered in an instant. Han Fei's heart sank. Damn it. Can't the two kings kill people? He heard the old turtle say, they really can't go in. The monarch tribulation was definitely not an ordinary tribulation. It was a test that the great Tao had for the person undergoing the tribulation. Transcending the tribulation together and forcefully barging into someone else's tribulation were two different things. Once you force your way in, you'll be violating the rules of the great Tao. How can the might of heaven tolerate you? Han Fei took a deep breath and looked at Xue Fan, whose body was rapidly regenerating. He suddenly remembered that Peaceful had told him that the White Armor Emperor had gone through the heavenly tribulation first, and the Life Queen had gone through the heavenly tribulation after. If it could be destroyed, the White Armor the Arch would have been destroyed a long time ago, and the Life Queen wouldn't have become a monarch. However, just because they couldn't enter the tribulation didn't mean they couldn't fight outside. The Life Queen used a wisp of green vine as a spear and shot out like a heavenly tribulation. The poison barrier descended, and Xue Fan's body was being corroded. This was the first time that Han Fei had seen Mu Wuhua use poison. So the Life Queen was a poison cultivator. The White Armor Emperor didn't stop attacking. All kinds of energy spears and shell shadows were thrown at Wang Jie. However, it was difficult to defy the might of heaven. Although you could threaten the person who was going through the heavenly tribulation, the heavenly tribulation would attack external forces immediately. Therefore, the White Armor Emperor's attack couldn't affect Xue Fan at all. Parasite. From the void of space, one corroded root after another reached out. In the blink of an eye, there were millions of them. Xue Fan said disdainfully, "Poison. I forgot to tell you that apart from parasites, my great Tao can also devour." At that moment, Xue Fan's handsome appearance turned into an ugly man with pustules all over his body. However, he didn't die. The eighth lightning bolt crashed down, and Xue Fan directly threw out the blood-colored scroll in his hand. All the living souls in it shot out. There were as many as 1,000,000 of them. At that moment, whether it was Han Fei, the Life Queen, or the White Armor Emperor, they were all horrified. How fucking cruel was this person? 1,000,000 lives were sacrificed just for him to go through the heavenly tribulation. However, Xue Fan didn't care at all. He looked at the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor coldly, with disdain in his eyes. At this moment, the lightning bolt fell from the sky, and the millions of living souls disappeared. Finally, when the lightning bolt landed on Xue Fan's body, he actually swallowed it all. Although a large part of his body collapsed, he took this lightning bolt. Han Fei thought to himself, not good. That big black umbrella should be used to face the last tribulation. Han Fei remembered that the old turtle once told him that the umbrella emperor of his generation could block anything with an umbrella in his hand. This thing could not only be used as a heavenly tribulation, but also to block extraterrestrial demons, right? Han Fei took a deep breath. Why did he think that a guy who had prepared for tens of thousands of years had to rely on the power of the earth vein to resist the heavenly tribulation? Han Fei even thought that this Xue Fan should have known of his existence a long time ago. So, was it possible that he was waiting for him to absorb the earth vein? Did he mislead him into thinking that he needed to rely on the earth vein to consolidate the advantage of the earth vein? If Xue Fan could even calculate this, Han Fei would have to admit defeat. But at this moment, the eighth lightning bolt had been passed, and Han Fei couldn't wait any longer. The White Armor Emperor sent out a small sapphire shell, which contained extremely high energy, and it fell into the lightning bolt. The Life Queen threw a fruit, and wherever the fruit passed, the void trembled. At this moment, Han Fei couldn't sit still and wait for death. He knew better than anyone that once Xue Fan succeeded in transcending the tribulation, not only would the Divine Sun die, but also the Life Queen and the White Armor Emperor would be no match for him. The waterwood heaven would be ruled by Xue Fan. At that moment, a body of black mist rose into the sky. Compared to others, Han Fei was just a body of black mist. He didn't care if the body of black mist would be destroyed by the lightning bolt. Anyway, he was immortal, and he still had the body of white mist. The moment Han Fei made his move, he forgot the divination of the desperate situation calculated by the Nine-Palace ruler of Providence. Perhaps because the desperate situation had become unpredictable, it gave him the confidence to launch a sneak attack. At that moment, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen looked at the area where Han Fei was. And the corners of Xue Fan's mouth curled up, as if he was relieved. He said, "Sure enough, that place couldn't trap you. You still came." Han Fei shouted, "Don't even think about becoming a king." At that moment, Han Fei's body carried 100 wisps of chaotic energy. Not for anything else, but for the divine sun to still be alive. He accepted it. If the chaotic energy was gone, he could get more. If the person was gone, then it was really gone. He wanted to see how the divine sun and the water deity would meet. Crack. Boom. Boom. Crack, crack, crack. At that moment, the 9th lightning bolt fell from the sky. The void collapsed, the spiritual fruit exploded, and the chaotic energy exploded. In an instant, the world turned dark, and it was a terrifying scene. In an instant, the waves swept over more than 50,000 kilometers. Even the head of the Blood Sea Divine Tree had been blown bald at this moment. Boom, the appearance of the great path cracks, and a downpour of blood rain fell. This was a sign that a venerable had fallen. However, this rain was not an ordinary venerable. Therefore, the moment the tear stain of the great path appeared, everyone was sure that this guy had finally fallen. The rolling waves didn't stop for a long time. In the sky, the thick lightning was still rolling and hadn't receded. At this moment, except for the Life Queen, the White Armor Emperor, and the Blood Sea Divine Wood, no other creatures could exist in the center of the explosion. Oh! There was one exception. Han Fei. Han Fei suddenly appeared from the void, and it was his real body. At that moment, he didn't have time to combine the two, so his body of black fog died together with Xue Fan. Han Fei waved at the Life Queen and said, "You're too late." However, the next moment, the dark clouds in the sky pressed down again, and the lightning appeared again. Han Fei only felt that he was suddenly facing a life and death crisis, and he subconsciously exerted the power of the Great Path to the fullest. He stomped his feet, and the coiled turtle array appeared. Boom, with a whip in the void, Han Fei was sent flying for 300 kilometers. At that moment, the heavenly tribulation descended again, directly enveloping Han Fei. In the lightning tribulation, a contemptuous voice sounded leisurely, "So, you think you've won?" Chapter 16:21. At this moment, everyone thought that Xue Fan was going to die. It was impossible for Xue Fan to survive under such a powerful bombardment. This battle had come to an end. But just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a figure appeared, and without giving Han Fei any chance to react, he was directly involved in a brand new thunderbolt. Han Fei was shocked. Where did this lightning come from? Who the hell attacked me? The next moment, he heard the old turtle's voice, "Not good, the one who just passed the tribulation is the Blood King, the one who left the Forest of Horrors." The moment he attacked, the Blood Sea Divine Wood was exposed. It was shocked and said, "Xue Fan, you actually devoured your original body." Ha ha ha! In the lightning tribulation, the sphere that everyone thought was Xue Fan's root suddenly cracked. A person who looked exactly like Xue Fan reappeared in the range of the lightning tribulation. Xue Fan laughed wildly. "I have 2 kings. How can I be free when I become a king alone? I have to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had the chance to swallow my original body. Fortunately, I planned to go through the tribulation today and dug out the remaining essence of you, Patriarch, and also dug out this hidden brat. Let me see, who can stop me now?" Han Fei had never met a person who could be so cunning. The relationship between the Blood King and Xue Fan was like the relationship between Tang Yen and Tang Ge. In fact, they were 2 independent individuals, but they had the same origin. In fact, the 2 could become kings together. In this way, they could even form a relationship of helping each other. It wasn't immoral for Xue Fan to swallow the Blood King, however, at least they didn't have to fight each other now. They could become kings together. As long as Xue Fan was willing to use the big black umbrella or his other trump cards, he might be able to survive the heavenly tribulation safely. However, Xue Fan didn't. In order to dig out Han Fei and the Divine Sun, he even abandoned his original body. Han Fei even suspected that his original body had been parasitized by this guy. When Han Fei fell into the lightning beam, the White Armor Emperor was shocked. The person who suddenly appeared was Han Fei. I just saw this kid pass the minor heavenly tribulation a few years ago. How many years has it been? This kid can participate in the Battle of Kings? Fortunately, Han Fei had been dragged into the heavenly tribulation by Xue Fan. Otherwise, if Han Fei had escaped, the White Armor Emperor would have immediately given up on hunting Xue Fan. Furthermore, the Blood Sea Heavenly would seem to have betrayed Xue Fan. As for why they betrayed him, there was no way to confirm this. However, the White Armor Emperor did not doubt the Blood Sea Divine would. Because tens of thousands of years before he became a king, he already knew about the Blood Sea Divine wood. At that time, there was no Blood Sea Divine Wood city at all. At that time, the Blood Sea Divine Wood was regarded as a strange place in the waterwood sky, and many people went there to explore it. Both the White Armor Emperor and the former Life Queen had seen the Blood Sea Divine Wood. In fact, the Blood Sea Divine Tree had given a lot of resources to many people, but it didn't pose any threat to the sea race, the human race, or the insect race. At this moment, the Life Queen's expression changed drastically. When she got the news from Han Fei, she was both shocked and speechless. Did Han Fei really sneak into the Blood Sea Divine Wood city? Moreover, he had mastered many secrets. At this moment, the heavenly tribulation descended again. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen retreated quickly. Although Han Fei was involved in the heavenly tribulation, there was nothing they could do. Not everyone could touch the heavenly tribulation. If they dared to enter, they would be going against the Great Tao and wouldn't get any benefits. At that moment, among all the people, only the Blood Sea Divine Wood stretched out a branch of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, pierced through the heavenly tribulation domain, and struck the void, trying to free Han Fei. Xue Fan snorted coldly, and hundreds of Blood Sea Divine Wood branches controlled by Xue Fan worked together to resist that one branch of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Xue Fan's voice was evil. If I had known, you wouldn't have been completely parasitized by me so easily. However, I have already controlled most of your power. You can't even protect yourself, and you still want to take people from me? Rumble, the first bolt of lightning rumbled and shattered. A large number of lightning arcs jumped and flickered on Han Fei's body. Han Fei was speechless. Who could have known that before his heavenly tribulation came, he would be forced to deal with other people's heavenly tribulations? And twice. Last time, there were only 6 bolts of lightning, but his flesh and blood directly collapsed, and his bones were almost broken. This time, although his strength had improved greatly and he had almost recovered to his peak state. However, he had just recovered to his peak state. Besides, it had only been a few months since his soul power recovered, and he had to deal with another heavenly tribulation. At this moment, when Xue Fan saw Han Fei's physique in the heavenly tribulation, he was also shocked and thought, this person's physique is so strong. He's just an advanced venerable, but he's completely fine after taking a king's tribulation. Is this a joke? At that moment, the heavenly tribulation enveloped 3 people. One was Xue Fan, one was Han Fei, and the last one was the Blood Sea Divine Wood that was mistaken as Xue Fan by the heavenly tribulation. The Blood Sea Divine Wood had no problem. His problem was how to cooperate with Han Fei to take down Xue Fan. But Han Fei seemed to be unable to protect himself now. Han Fei panicked as soon as he entered the heavenly tribulation. Xue Fan's king's tribulation was completely different from Jin Zhanghai's king's tribulation. If there was no accident, Han Fei didn't think he could make it through. Therefore, he needed to find shelter now. Han Fei wanted to use the star transposition technique to escape. However, under the heavenly tribulation, the star transposition technique was completely ineffective. At this moment, even if Xue Fan died immediately, as long as Han Fei was still alive, the heavenly tribulation wouldn't disappear. The heavenly Tao would assume that Han Fei had robbed Xue Fan's heavenly tribulation. Not only would it not become weaker, but it might even become stronger. Rumble, the second heavenly tribulation fell. Han Fei, who couldn't even take care of himself, naturally had no time to pick a fight with Xue Fan. And Xue Fan was also very cautious about his heavenly tribulation, so he didn't attack Han Fei. After all, they were all in the heavenly tribulation. Xue Fan thought that Han Fei would definitely die, so he didn't need to do anything. Puff! Look, crack, crack, crack. Sure enough, Xue Fan took the second heavenly tribulation more easily. And Han Fei, because his body hadn't recovered to the most perfect state, was directly hit into the sea by the heavenly tribulation. Han Fei's body was covered with cracks again like a porcelain doll. It seemed that he could be destroyed at any time. Obviously, Han Fei didn't dare to be careless, nor did he care about his stiff and numb body. At this moment, all kinds of large arrays quickly formed around Han Fei. Although the arrays might not be that useful at this moment, he would block as many as he could. According to Han Fei's estimation, when the third heavenly tribulation fell, even if his body didn't collapse, it should be almost there. He couldn't survive the fourth heavenly tribulation. By then, even if he blocked it with the yin-yang wheel in the sky, it would be quite good if he could survive six heavenly tribulation. Seeing this, the Life Queen was also extremely nervous. This was a king tribulation. No matter how strong Han Fei was now, how could he resist a king tribulation? Sure enough, when the third heavenly tribulation fell, Xue Fan blocked it. Although most of his body had collapsed, he still had the strength to control some of the Blood Sea Divine Wood branches to fight against the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. At this moment, the only thing that everyone could rejoice about was that the earth veins were almost completely destroyed. Xue Fan couldn't use anything anymore. When the heavenly tribulation fell, Han Fei wouldn't be so lucky anymore. Although his body had just recovered, although he managed to resist the third heavenly tribulation, his flesh and blood were scattered all over. The golden bones on his body were bright, and many parts of his bones were exposed. Seeing that Han Fei had actually withstood 3 heavenly tribulations with his body, even Xue Fan's expression changed. An advanced venerable, who hadn't reached the peak, could withstand his heavenly tribulation. Just how strong was this guy's physical body? If Han Fei's strength reached the half-king realm, it would be very easy for his body to survive 6 heavenly tribulations in a row, wouldn't it? Han Fei didn't use the Heaven Awakening Divine Technique immediately. Han Fei knew that his Heaven Awakening Divine Technique might be able to restrain Xue Fan's Great Path, or even his Big Black Umbrella. Since you dragged me into the King Tribulation, I dare to drag you to death. Therefore, Han Fei wouldn't use it easily unless it was a critical moment. Han Fei thought of something and shouted, "Blood Sea Divine Wood, how about we cooperate for the time being? Protect me. Protect me, and I guarantee that this Xue Fan won't become a king." Han Fei's words were actually not to the Divine Sun, but to the White Armor Emperor. This White Armor Emperor seemed to be fighting fiercely, but he hadn't really hit much. At least the Life Queen was crazily destroying the pattern of the earth veins here. However, what did the White Armor Emperor do? Bombarding the air was like scratching an itch. Hearing Han Fei's words, a crystal-clear blood-colored twig shot in front of Han Fei. Xue Fan shouted, "Humph! Blood Sea Ancestor, I didn't want to kill you when I became a king because you helped me back then. So that you can be reincarnated. Now, die, who?" Thunder Tribulation Saber. In Han Fei's body, the chaotic energy collapsed, and his strength rose to the peak. In the Thunder Tribulation, the Saber Prison ran rampant. Boom! The fourth thunderbolt fell, and the Blood Sea Divine Wood branch in Han Fei's hand shattered with a crack. A blood-colored barrier blocked in front of him. Crack, crack, crack. Although cracks appeared on the blood-colored barrier, the cracking speed was not fast. The fourth thunderbolt should be able to withstand it. On the other side, Xue Fan shouted at the Life Queen, "Ridiculous! Do you think you destroyed my earth veins? Little do you know that the earth vein array of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City has never been the earth vein itself. It's the big red trunk." At this moment, once Xue Fan used the earth vein, the truth would be discovered immediately, so he might as well say it himself. Hum clatter. Within a radius of 10,000 kilometers, all the roots of the big red trunk suddenly began to absorb power in all directions, causing the big red trunk outside the Blood Sea Divine Wood City and even 300,000 kilometers away to provide energy to the center. It seemed that this Xue Fan had connected all the roots of the big red trunk into an intertwined energy network that extended in all directions, like a power grid. Once the center needed it, the central array would quickly draw the energy of the big red trunk on the periphery. At this moment, a pillar of light shot into the sky from the bottom of the sea, shrouding Xue Fan. The red light and the thunder tribulation were alternating, and the energy ripples spread around the Blood Sea Divine would branch one after another, asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1622. In fact, this battle was beyond Xue Fan's expectations. Xue Fan didn't expect that these people would completely destroy the Blood King's tribulation. Within 50,000 kilometers, countless Millennium Snappers had died. Even though most of the Millennium Snappers were still far away from the top of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Under the impact of the huge force, all the law enforcers within 10,000 kilometers, who were not very talented, had died. There were hundreds of thousands of people who had died. And those Millennium Snappers were the most miserable. Many people thought that they could take advantage of the king's tribulation, and some were even ready to make a breakthrough. However, the sudden eruption of power caused countless people to shatter. However, in this battle situation, perhaps the lives of these Millennium Snappers didn't matter anymore. At this moment, Xue Fan frowned slightly. He knew that the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua would come, but he didn't expect that Mu Wuhua would attack the earth veins. Although Mu Wuhua's random destruction didn't really destroy many earth veins. Her attack had turned the ground upside down, and more than 30% of the roots of the big red trunk had been damaged. At this moment, seeing that Mu Wuhua still didn't intend to stop, Xue Fan had to use the power of the earth veins in advance. When this power gathered, Mu Wuhua was shocked. "Are you crazy? 100,000 big red trunk trees just to block a heavenly tribulation for you? Aren't you afraid that you'll be haunted by bad karma from now on?" The White Armor Emperor was also shocked. Is this person crazy? Spiritual plants could withstand a lot of energy. These big red trunks were all cultivated by Xue Fan and spread along the earth veins. Just for this day. However, the countless big red trunk were, after all, relatively ordinary demon plants. Few of them had Xue Fan's luck, and few of them could give birth to spiritual wisdom like Xue Fan. Their power was limited. The 10,000-year-old big red trunk that Han Fei cut down was actually in an unconscious state. If it was a big red trunk of that level, who knew how much power it would take to resist a king's tribulation? After all, not every big red trunk was like the one that Han Fei cut down. Even the tree core was full of spiritual stones. That one was just a special case. On the Blood Sea Divine Wood City's side, countless Millennium Snappers lived on these big red trunks. They devoured and cultivated every day. The daily throughput was no joke. Xue Fan used the power of the big red trunk forest to resist the fourth wave of heavenly tribulation. There were more than 100,000 big red trunk here. At this rate, Xue Fan would definitely be able to survive the fifth thunderbolt. However, correspondingly, the number of big red trunk and Millennium Snappers that had been sacrificed was uncountable. Therefore, in order to block these two heavenly tribulations, Xue Fan had sacrificed countless lives. This was probably not tolerated by the heavenly Tao. At this time, Han Fei suddenly increased his strength by 3 times and whipped at the lightning. Using the heavenly tribulation as a blade, he slashed at Xue Fan. What? Xue Fan was stunned. What kind of stupid battle technique is this? Even the power of lightning could be captured and used? It could be said that the small Ascension Saber scroll had reached the limit for those below the king tier. Suddenly, the void split open and a 1,000-foot-long blade mark appeared. The edge of the blade stirred up a storm and raging waves, shattering a large number of red roots and slashing straight at Xue Fan. Clang! The red pillar of light enveloped Xue Fan. Han Fei's saber was blocked, but it only accelerated the depletion of the earth vein. Han Fei shouted, "White Armor Emperor, this person is just a half-king. A half-king can fight against 2 kings without being defeated. Do you dare to let him survive the king's tribulation? Take out some of your true abilities and destroy his earth vein power. Otherwise, there will be endless troubles in the future." Hearing this, the White Armor Emperor was also afraid of Han Fei, but Han Fei was right. In the past, he had fought against Xue Fan with Mu Wuhua. However, at that time, Xue Fan seemed to have fought against them with the Blood Sea Divine Wood. At that time, both he and the Life Queen thought that Xue Fan was the incarnation of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. After all, the Blood Sea Divine Wood had become a king earlier than them. This was something they all knew. At this moment, it was too hasty. The White Armor Emperor was forced to fight inexplicably. Therefore, he didn't think much and didn't know much. Han Fei's shout shocked him. He had a further understanding of Xue Fan's horror. The White Armor Emperor thought to himself, "This Xue Fan is so extraordinary. The original body just now withstood 8 bolts of lightning in a row and almost survived the 9th. This Xue Fan wouldn't just die in the 4th bolt of lightning. Otherwise, how could he dare to transcend the tribulation?" Therefore, the White Armor Emperor suddenly made up his mind. White armor seal the way, chaotic sun covers the sky. Open. Suddenly, the sky changed color, and the lightning seemed to be covered with a layer of black mist. Holding a long spear, the White Armor Emperor stepped into the heavenly tribulation, attacked Xue Fan in the 2nd step, and grabbed the lightning with his big hand in the 3rd step. Han Fei was dumbfounded by this operation. What the hell is this? Almost at the same time, in Han Fei's mind, the old turtle suddenly shouted, "Come on, the heavenly tribulation realm has been opened. Get out." Han Fei was about to leave, but the Life Queen clasped Divine at Han Fei. In the blink of an eye, the White Armor Emperor's body seemed to have teleported and appeared next to Han Fei in the next moment. With a thrust of his spear, the Life Queen's roots were cut off. Han Fei was shaken by the huge force and couldn't get out. However, at that critical moment, Han Fei shouted, "There's a forbidden technique here." Crack! This void confinement obviously couldn't stop a king, so it was instantly shattered. But it was also at this moment that little Fatty appeared directly on the Life Queen's half of the vine. The Life Queen didn't know what Han Fei was doing. In an instant, she dragged little Fatty out. And Han Fei himself couldn't leave because of the White Armor Emperor's obstruction. Immediately afterward, the White Armor Emperor's powerful force was shattered. The whole process didn't even take a second. The White Armor Emperor cut off the connection with the heavenly tribulation, blew up the terrifying energy that Xue Fan had absorbed with one blow, and also grabbed a handful of lightning and stuffed it into his body to help him temper his body and absorb energy. This old guy was very shrewd. He knew that Xue Fan was in extreme danger, so he agreed to help. However, he didn't want Han Fei to go out. Thus, he made use of this instant to do so many things. Under the attack of the king, most of Xue Fan's body collapsed. A huge amount of energy helped Xue Fan reconstruct his body. Of course, a part of it was shattered by the White Armor Emperor's spear just now. And at this moment, the Life Queen also knew that Xue Fan used the big red trunk as the source of the power of the Earth Line. The Life Queen's direct attack continued to destroy the roots of the big red trunk. It was also because she was distracted that the Life Queen was a little slower just now and failed to pull Han Fei out. Boom! Thunder rumbled in the sky. After the 4th lightning tribulation, the Blood Sea Divine Wood branch in Han Fei's hand hadn't broken yet, but it was probably almost there. Xue Fan didn't say anything. Although the White Armor Emperor's attack was not weak, how could the Earth Line that he had set up for so long be so simple? Han Fei, on the other hand, surprised Xue Fan. This person's vitality was really tenacious. He almost ran away, however, judging from the White Armor Emperor's reaction, he seemed to be quite afraid of Han Fei. As a dignified king, he deliberately stopped the Life Queen from saving this person. Xue Fan sneered and said, "White Armor Emperor, you won't be at ease if I don't die. But will you feel at ease if this person doesn't die? Why don't you wait until he dies in my heavenly tribulation, and then you can attack me? It won't be too late." Han Fei's expression changed. This soul ball still didn't forget to provoke him at this time. Han Fei said, "White Armor Emperor, although you and I have to fight. But this Xue Fan is an evil king. A half-king can fight against two kings like you." Can you believe what he said? The Life Queen nodded. Yes, this person is not the Blood Sea Divine Wood, but as a half-king, he can control a king realm expert. White Armor Emperor, you can think about it. Xue Fan laughed. Mu Wuhua, don't think I don't know. Back then, you colluded with Ancestor Blood Sea in private. Now you pretend you don't know him. Who are you pretending for? The White Armor Emperor was expressionless at the moment. He had been holding back the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. However, the White Shell City and the Cloud Sea Divine Tree were in complete opposition. The two often attacked each other, and one of them was bound to die. How strong would Xue Fan be in the end? The White Armor Emperor didn't know. However, Han Fei had to die now. He had witnessed Han Fei's growth. Han Fei's growth was too fast. It wasn't that there were no reincarnated experts in the White Shell City. Even Zhang Xiaotian was only a half-venerated expert now. This was already Zhang Xiaotian's growth speed when he went through the trial field of the Forbidden Area. But compared with the current Han Fei, Zhang Xiaotian was like heaven and earth. Their growth speed was worlds apart. The White Armor Emperor even felt that there shouldn't be anyone in this world who could grow to such a level in such a short period of time. The White Armor Emperor immediately shouted, "Mu Wuhua, I've cut off nearly half of this person's earth vein power." As he said, "I won't do anything until Han Fei is dead." Xue Fan suddenly frowned. "Are you Han Fei?" Although Xue Fan had never seen Han Fei, he had definitely heard of him. After experiencing the 4-9 King Tribulation in the Waterwood Heaven, the battle on the island, and defeating all the experts, but at that time, what realm was Han Fei in? What realm was he in now? Suddenly, Xue Fan knew why the White Armor Emperor cared so much about Han Fei. Unfortunately, in those battles, Xue Fan was just pretending and didn't care at all. So, he didn't go to see it in person. Otherwise, he would have recognized Han Fei a long time ago. Rumble, the fifth bolt of lightning descended with a loud rumble. Mu Wuhua controlled his roots and cut hundreds of thousands of kilometers. However, the Earth vein network created by Xue Fan had been planned for countless years. How could it be destroyed in such a short period of time? In this tribulation, the crystal-clear twig in Han Fei's hand burst out a blood-colored barrier again. And when Han Fei saw that Xue Fan was still absorbing power from the earth vein, the red beam of light had already soared into the sky. Immediately, Han Fei waved his hand, and the 1,000-foot-long array suddenly fell into the sea. As soon as this array appeared, with the perception of a king, he could immediately perceive that a large array had formed within a radius of 50,000 kilometers around the Blood Sea Divine Wood. The shape of this array was exactly the yin-yang pattern. When Mu Wuhua saw this array, he suddenly narrowed his eyes. It seems that Han Fei has also mastered the yin-yang Great Tao. This was just a yin-yang array, not a heaven and earth natural array. With Han Fei's current ability, unless he was given enough time, it would be impossible for him to set up this heaven and earth natural array of about 50,000 kilometers. Even for this yin-yang formation, he had used Yang Ruoyan's connections to set it up. This was the condition of the deal between Han Fei and Yang Ruoyan. And in the past 2 days, Han Fei wandered in the black fog body, in fact, to see if there was any problem with the array, so that he could adjust it in time. Fortunately, although Xue Fan's breakthrough was too sudden, his own array had been set up early. Although it couldn't hold for long, it was still a while. It was not easy for people who didn't understand arrays to break such a large array. The earth vein pattern formed by the massive big red trunk, which wanted to transmit a large amount of energy to Xue Fan. At that moment, it was all absorbed by the two major array eyes of the yin-yang array. Second. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1623. The moment Han Fei sealed the earth meridian, Xue Fan's eyes revealed a sinister look. He immediately shouted, "All venerable ones, hurry up and break this formation." In fact, the supremacies of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City were not very familiar with Xue Fan. That was because Xue Fan had never been close to anyone. At this moment, the three kings were engaged in a chaotic battle in the sky. Those who were still alive within tens of thousands of miles were frantically fleeing outwards. What could these supremacies do in such a situation? These supremacies didn't even dare to look at the tribulation site. They had always thought that a supremacy was undergoing the king tribulation, and that Xue Fan was guarding that person, fighting against the white armor emperor and the life queen. At this moment, after hearing Xue Fan's orders, only a dozen or so people dared to enter the center of the Blood Sea Divine Tree at this critical moment. The battlefield was filled with danger at every second. Buzz, as soon as he finished speaking, the black umbrella appeared. Ring, the black umbrella rose into the air as Xue Fan roared, 99 soul-breaking bells, break my 100 souls heaven-concealing barrier. Hula, he could only see a layer of black veil that spanned thousands of zhang, blocking the sky like the shadow of a ghost. Within the black mist, 100 souls howled. The souls of the venerables were incomparably agitated, their soul power reaching the heavens. Boom! Lightning enveloped the area, and hundreds of divine souls howled and screamed. Kacha! Han Fei's scarlet barrier couldn't hold on much longer. It was already densely covered with cracks. As long as a wisp of lightning escaped, the blood-colored barrier would be broken. Han Fei asked, "Master Divine Prince, do you have any more twigs?" On the other side, Han Fei turned his hand and wrapped himself in the earth vein spring. Han Fei spread his arms. Dragging me into your heavenly tribulation is the only failure of your heavenly tribulation. The apocalyptic divine technique, Buzz, a hole appeared in the sky, which had been covered by the black curtain. The holy radiance that filled the sky instantly shrouded everything. Holy light and lightning intertwined, and Han Fei descended the apocalypse divine technique with 10,000 years of vitality, intending to purify the evil. He heard the old turtle said, "Right now you are working twice the effort for half the result. If you can completely grasp the purification technique, then all evil will retreat." Han Fei knew the purification technique. Actually, he knew the purification spell, but it wasn't at such a high level. Furthermore, it was rarely used. Purification required a pure heart to emit the most sincere holy light. He didn't have it at all. Therefore, the difficulty of practicing the purification art was roughly the same as that of practicing the indestructible body. Having no choice, Han Fei could only try his best to consume his vitality. Fortunately, he had looted a lot of earth vein springs. Otherwise, he might not have enough spiritual fruits. Bang, 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 within the 100 souls sky-encompassing barrier, one soul shadow after another was annihilated. The souls of the venerables were annihilated by the holy light. The power of the 100 souls heaven-covering barrier seemed to weaken as the number of souls decreased. In less than 2 seconds, as many as 30 souls had been purified in the 100 souls covering the sky. Kacha! One of the 99 soul-severing bells shattered. Xue Fan's expression changed. What kind of Tao is this? It could actually be used during the heavenly tribulation. Forcefully purify the 100 souls heaven-shrouding barrier. And the heavenly tribulation had the ability to repel all evils. Therefore, when encountering an inhumane treasure like the 100 souls sky-obscuring barrier, it was only natural that he would attack it with all his might. As a result, the consumption of the souls in the 100 souls sky-obscuring barrier was several times faster than Xue Fan thought. Xue Fan thought that the 100 souls sky-obscuring barrier could resist at least 3 thunderbolts, or even the last one. However, before the fifth thunderbolt was over, the first layer of the 100 Souls sky-obscuring barrier was broken. Kacha! Unfortunately, Han Fei's blood-colored barrier shattered faster than the 100 Souls sky-obscuring barrier. As soon as the barrier was broken, Han Fei's flesh and blood collapsed. In just a few seconds, only a indestructible golden body was left. Damn it, my body has just recovered. Apocalypse Divine Technique. Fortunately, the fifth heavenly tribulation was over. Han Fei used the Apocalypse Divine Technique to reconstruct his flesh and blood and return. Outside, the White Armor Emperor clenched his fists behind his back. These two people in the heavenly tribulation were no longer the so-called heavenly talents. They were really rare geniuses of the same era. However, these two people were together. Take Xue Fan for example. God knows where this guy hunted more than 300 venerables. He actually refined this evil big black umbrella. He didn't treat venerables as venerables at all. It seemed that all the creatures in this Blood Sea Divine Wood City were Xue Fan's objects, and Han Fei, although he was not an evil cultivator, his potential was simply too strong. In just a few years, not only did Han Fei advance from an explorer to an advanced venerable, but he was also strong enough to cultivate an indestructible golden body. So, how could he be allowed to live? Besides, Han Fei's Apocalypse Divine Technique was once the human King Dao. With this technique, this person was almost immortal. No wonder Han Fei dared to compete with Xue Fan in the King's heavenly tribulation. The fifth heavenly tribulation ended, and Han Fei's flesh and blood were reconstructed. However, Han Fei didn't let the flesh and blood attach to his body, but directly gathered them into a ball. Anyway, if it touched his body, it would be smashed to pieces. Now, Han Fei could comfort himself that he was letting the heavenly tribulation temper his body. Han Fei immediately rushed to the branch of the Blood Sea Divine Wood below. The sixth heavenly tribulation was coming soon. If he didn't find shelter now, his golden body would be smashed to pieces. Han Fei felt that this sixth heavenly tribulation seemed to be able to survive with his current physique and golden body. However, there were still the seventh, eighth, and ninth heavenly tribulation. This was not his own heavenly tribulation, and it was not time for him to resist it. Why should he absorb other people's heavenly tribulation to temper his body? As soon as Han Fei landed, he heard Xue Fan shout angrily, "Blood Sea Ancestor, don't blame me for being merciless. Devour." Bam! 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 Because Xue Fan controlled most of the Blood Sea Divine Wood's body, Xue Fan swallowed the power of the Blood Sea Divine Wood to prevent it from providing help to Han Fei. Xue Fan was not stupid. He knew that even if the Blood Sea Divine Wood contained power, it wouldn't be a lot. Otherwise, it would have crushed him to death. At this moment, he could control 99% of the Blood Sea Divine Wood's power. If the Blood Sea Divine Wood dared to provide help to Han Fei, then he could find a chance to completely parasitize it. Because he had already discovered the last origin of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. Seeing that the Divine Sun didn't respond, the old turtle said before Han Fei could figure it out, "It can't help you now. Once it helps you, its last origin will be eroded, which means that Xue Fan will completely control the power of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. The balance between them will be instantly broken, and Xue Fan will definitely become a king." Bam! Without hesitation, Han Fei activated the Heavenly Oasis Divine Walk, Agility of Wind, and Erase. His speed was extremely fast. He was going to rush into Xue Fan's 100 Souls covering sky barrier. How could Xue Fan do that? Therefore, the heavenly tribulation was coming. The void vines were endless, and the fire was soaring. Xue Fan tried to parasitize Han Fei. And Han Fei threw out the Heavenly Awakening Divine Technique as if it was free. Rumble, seeing that the stalemate was about to break, Han Fei cursed, "Son of a bitch, I'm going to kill you." The Supreme Yin-Yang will suddenly unfolded at this moment. Ignoring space and barriers, the void vines cut one after another, and the yin-yang will directly cut into the 100 Souls covering sky barrier. Outside, the White Armor Emperor was shocked. Han Fei has a pair of amazing great ways. What a human, Han Fei. Mu Wuhua was unable to attack the heavenly tribulation at all. If Han Fei released his strongest move inside, he would be blind. He could only quickly cut off the big red trunk's network of earth veins, and at the same time, secretly hunt some venerables. Alas, Mu Wuhua sighed, caught in a dilemma. But next door, the White Armor Emperor's eyes lit up when he saw the two of them fighting in the heavenly tribulation. Just now, he said he wouldn't attack, but he suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed the energy within thousands of kilometers. In his hand, a crystal white jade shell was condensing. Mu Wuhua shouted, "White Armor Emperor, don't force me to attack you now." The White Armor Emperor sneered. Then come on. Both of them must die today in order to maintain the balance of this world. Otherwise, who can maintain this balance? Bam! Mu Wuhua immediately struck the void, and the long vines swept towards the White Armor Emperor like swords. Both of them were fighting at the same time. One attacked the heavenly tribulation, and the other interfered with the earth veins. In the heavenly tribulation, roar, Xue Fan roared wildly. I've never seen such a fierce great way. It's just an advanced venerable, but I can't break it. Rumble, as soon as the sixth thunderbolt fell, the first canopy of the 100 Souls sky-covering barrier collapsed in an instant. When the sixth thunderbolt fell, the second canopy of the 100 Souls sky-covering barrier was broken, and the third canopy had begun to melt. Rumble, when the seventh thunderbolt fell, before it reached the middle, the third canopy of the 100 Souls sky-covering barrier collapsed, and the 99 soul-breaking bells all exploded. The 100 Souls sky-covering barrier could have resisted at least 3 heavenly tribulations, but it only blocked 2.5. The two of them were covered by the heavenly tribulation. Without the protection of the two, Han Fei's supreme yin-yang will stopped spinning and was beaten back to its original form. Once, Han Fei relied on it to resist 3 heavenly tribulations. Xue Fan's body collapsed. This was no longer the beginning of the heavenly tribulation. When it came to the 7th heavenly tribulation, he couldn't force his way through it. He gave up the fight with the Blood Sea Divine Wood and sent a large amount of power into his body. At that moment, Han Fei used the heaven-opening divine technique to recover, and Xue Fan used the power of the Blood Sea Divine Wood to recover. The two of them looked at the sky almost at the same time. The 8th thunderbolt was critical. Xue Fan suddenly grinned. As soon as his body was reassembled, he raised his head and roared, "This is my territory. The billions of creatures here are all my flesh and blood. If I don't become a king, how can there be justice?" Xue Fan knew that the earth vein array had been broken. From the moment he used the energy of the Blood Sea Divine Wood to repair his body, it had been broken. Sure enough, the Blood Sea Divine Wood seized the opportunity. In an instant, all the veins between the big red trunks were cut off. Unfortunately, the power of the Blood Sea Divine Wood was limited. While Xue Fan was using most of his power to recover, the Blood Sea Divine Wood shook and billions of leaves suddenly began to wither. He was snatching the body. At this moment, 3 streams of chaotic energy collapsed in Han Fei's body. In fact, from the moment he started the heavenly tribulation, Han Fei had been maintaining the use of the chaotic energy. However, compared with the power of the heavenly tribulation, the chaotic energy was consumed too fast. Rumble, when the 8th lightning bolt was about to come, Xue Fan shouted, "Thousands of fish soar into the sky, return to my origin." The Life Queen immediately shouted, "Asshole, you are killing indiscriminately. Ha ha ha. Their lives are all given by me. I am their only master. It is their honor to provide for me." At this moment, the old turtle said in Han Fei's heart, millions of red fish were instantly drained of their vitality and died. At this moment, Han Fei couldn't stay calm anymore. He didn't care about the lives of millions of Millennium Snappers, but Xue Fan couldn't become a king. It seemed to have been decided for a long time, but it also seemed to be in an instant. Han Fei shouted, "Fuse." Ah, with the caw of a crow, a pair of black wings suddenly appeared behind Han Fei. At this moment, bloody, brutal, and ferocious aura appeared on Han Fei. Whoop, the black wings flapped, and the Emperor Sparrow fused, there seemed to be a strange light in Han Fei's eyes, which made Xue Fan's heart tremble as if a terrible crisis was coming. Han Fei shouted in a low voice, "Eye of disaster." Third. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1624. All this while, the old turtle had been praising the arch sparrow as if it was a divine being. Therefore, Han Fei knew very well how serious it was to have the Emperor Sparrow. Once the Emperor Sparrow appeared, if someone discovered this secret, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, Han Fei rarely used the Emperor Sparrow. Although he would occasionally release it, it was just an ordinary hunting trip, so it was not a big problem. Today, Han Fei didn't know if anyone would recognize the Emperor Sparrow with his current appearance. However, at this critical juncture where life and death hung by a thread, he had paid such a huge price. If Xue Fan were to become a king, then wouldn't all his efforts have been in vain? In terms of strength, although he was an advanced venerable, the current half-king stage could no longer suppress him. Under Han Fei's interference, Xue Fan's many means didn't work out. At this moment, Xue Fan ignored the so-called negative karma and forcibly exchanged the lives of all living beings for his own tribulation. His craziness was horrifying. In any case, they were a race that he had painstakingly cultivated, and Xue Fan was indeed their faith. But now, these Millennium Snappers all became leaks at this moment. Not only was their vitality gathering, but their luck might also be sucked away by Xue Fan. In this case, Han Fei couldn't find any other way to stop this guy. After all, Xue Fan had prepared too many trump cards. The entire Blood Sea Divine Wood City, hundreds of thousands of kilometers of big red trunk forest, and hundreds of millions of Millennium Snappers. If the lives of these Millennium Snappers were to be exchanged for Xue Fan's life, there was no reason for Xue Fan not to become a king. The cry of the Emperor Sparrow was the only power that Han Fei could exert now, and it was also the only great technique of the Emperor Sparrow, which was the Eye of Disaster. The White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua, who were outside, didn't know, but Xue Fan felt the crisis. However, after this cry, Han Fei immediately cancelled the fusion with the Emperor Sparrow, which Xue Fan didn't understand. Even the White Armor Emperor and Mu Wuhua were dumbfounded. What's going on? Only the Divine Prince and the Source World shook slightly. At that moment, a storm was set off in the Divine Prince's heart. Is that the Emperor Sparrow? The status of a divine child was extremely noble. He was the son of a divine spirit. Although he might be the most down-and-out son of God in history, there were some inheritances and insights that others did not have. The appearance of the Emperor Sparrow was usually a sign of disaster. At that moment, the Divine Prince even wondered if Han Fei was Wang Han. However, the Emperor Sparrow's caw and gaze didn't produce any messy reactions. Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, "Old Yuan, why is there no response?" The old turtle was speechless. "That's not my spiritual beast. You don't know." However, based on this Emperor's experience, even if there will be a calamity, it shouldn't come so quickly. Han Fei, he couldn't wait for the results, but the boundless life force was converging. Whether it was the White Armor Emperor or Mu Wuhua, they could no longer remain calm at this moment. Everything had happened too suddenly. This was especially so for Bai Dijia. No matter which of the two survived the heavenly tribulation, it would be extremely dangerous. The moment this million life force appeared, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen's hearts sank. They seemed to have foreseen what would happen after Xue Fan successfully transcended the heavenly tribulation. The two of them subconsciously looked at each other and seemed to have made up their minds. If Xue Fan became a king, they would try to eliminate him before he fully consolidated his strength. As for Han Fei, although the Life Queen wanted to save him, the eighth lightning bolt was about to fall. The Life Queen was not born with a shell like the White Armor Emperor, so she couldn't rush into the heavenly tribulation at all. At this time, even the Life Queen didn't think that Han Fei could survive such a lightning bolt. At the last critical moment, Han Fei didn't give up just like that. At this moment, Han Fei couldn't care less about exposing Forge the Universe. He had tried to enter Forge the universe many times. At this time, he was in a state of being struck by the heavenly tribulation. His body was numb, and it was not suitable for him to fight. However, he still couldn't enter Forge the universe. If he could, Han Fei would go in now. Anyway, there were only a limited number of people who could see him. The cage seal was still there, and there was actually no regular passage to other territories in the Shuemu heaven. He had plenty of opportunities to kill Xue Fan and the White Armor Emperor. The Divine Sun and the Life Queen probably wouldn't betray him. By the time he could kill the White Armor Emperor, they probably wouldn't be his opponents anymore. Rumble, the 8th lightning bolt rumbled, and Han Fei still failed. Han Fei also knew that he was running out of time, so he shouted, "Explode." At that moment, Han Fei raised his head to the sky, shrouded by the invincible will, and the invincible fist mark soared into the sky. The chaotic energy in his body collapsed as if it was worthless. In an instant, thousands of punches, tens of thousands of punches, almost every one of which could shatter a middle-level venerable, were still not enough under the 8th lightning bolt. Han Fei's flesh and blood melted again, and cracks appeared on the indestructible golden body. However, his punches didn't stop. Seeing that the fist mark couldn't break through the heavenly tribulation, Han Fei punched Xue Fan and roared, "Berserk! Ancient desolate war body, berserk transformation!" Han Fei's strength was even stronger. Regardless of his flesh and blood melting and his bones breaking, he attacked Xue Fan. Bam! 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 In terms of strength, although Xue Fan was not weak, Han Fei was stronger. Han Fei's strength had already surpassed Wan Lang. Under the Great Tao, the strength of more than 30,000 waves could be said to be invincible in the Venerable Realm. Even if Xue Fan was talented, he could not compare to Han Fei in terms of strength. Of course, Han Fei dared to do this because he had long heard that Xue Fan almost never fought. A person who rarely fought would definitely not be good at strength. As expected, Xue Fan's body exploded after being hit by thousands of punches. Originally, he was barely able to withstand the lightning. At this moment, Han Fei relied on the indestructible golden body, disregarding the tempering of the lightning, and refused to retreat. At this moment, Xue Fan really regretted dragging Han Fei into his heavenly tribulation. He originally thought that with Han Fei's ability, one lightning bolt at most would be enough to shatter him. But who would have thought that an advanced Venerable Realm expert could withstand the 8th heavenly tribulation? Because Xue Fan's vitality was too strong, although his body was constantly disintegrating, it was also constantly recovering. While being bombarded by Han Fei, Xue Fan let out a low roar, and the exploded body stopped reassembling. Instead, it directly turned into a huge tree that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Its huge body appeared from the bottom of the sea to the sky. Han Fei punched into the tree and punched in all directions, causing Xue Fan's body to explode continuously. When the 8th heavenly tribulation fell, the heavenly awakening divine technique came, and Han Fei seized all the time to recover himself. Looking down, Han Fei found that his bones, arms, fists, ribs, were all full of cracks. After all, he was weaker than Xue Fan. Did Han Fei want to survive such a heavenly tribulation? He was still far from it. Xue Fan grinned hideously. "I admit that you are very strong. If you reach the half-king realm, I'm afraid that no one below the king realm can defeat you. However, you can't survive the heavenly demon baptism of the 9th heavenly tribulation. But I have infinite vitality and can survive it." Bah! Han Fei suddenly retreated. When he was rushing, his aura changed in a strange way. The aura of a human had disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into the aura of the Blood Sea Divine Wood. How useful could the art of deception be? Han Fei didn't care. He was just imitating it, but he could actually still distinguish it. Because the Divine Sun's realm was far higher than Han Fei's, Han Fei couldn't imitate it completely. After doing all this, Han Fei didn't care about anything else and suddenly carried a huge skull more than 600 meters long. This was the dragon head that Zhao Xianglong had buried in the eye of the Forest of Terror. Han Fei originally wanted to use the complete dragon corpse to help him block the lightning tribulation, however, on second thought, it didn't seem right. The dragon corpse only had the strength of a venerable. However, this dragon head was the skeleton of a real king. How could the skeleton of a king not withstand the lightning tribulation better than the corpse of a venerable? King Bone. The White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen were naturally not stupid. They recognized this terrifying aura at a glance. Xue Fan's face was extremely dark. He didn't expect that Han Fei still had a trick up his sleeve at this point. He had no way out. At this time, he certainly wouldn't waste his energy to kill Han Fei. At this time, he could only destroy more Millennium Snappers to maintain his infinite vitality and resist the heavenly tribulation. Xue Fan grinned hideously. Let's see. Can I become a king? No matter how many means you have, you are just an advanced venerable. If I become a king, what can you do? Han Fei ignored him and sneered. Heaven Awakening Divine Technique. Han Fei's 10,000-year earth vein spring water had long been exhausted. There were 10,000 kilograms of spring water in Forge the Universe, and more than half of it had been consumed. At this moment, he was still crazily casting the Heaven Awakening Divine Technique. However, this time, he not only covered himself, but also the Divine Sun. Han Fei didn't know if the Dragon Bone could help him block the last heavenly tribulation. However, if the Divine Sun could regain control of part of his body, he might be able to help him in the end. The Divine Sun should know what to choose. Xue Fan couldn't live. If he lived, he had to die. Therefore, Han Fei had to live. Now, it was impossible to kill Xue Fan with only the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. Once Xue Fan became a king, he would completely destroy the origin of the Divine Sun. Once the Divine Sun died, his Blood Sea Divine body would become the Blood King's incarnation. At that time, who could kill Xue Fan? Rumble, the sea of clouds in all directions became heavier and heavier. The last heavenly tribulation turned into a purple light, like a grand, different-colored sunset. Xue Fan was swallowing the endless vitality of the Millennium Snappers. He raised his head and smiled, fearless in the face of the heavenly tribulation. But he didn't notice that at this moment, Han Fei's aura suddenly dropped. His peak battle strength had completely disappeared. And Han Fei's indestructible golden body was shining brightly. Han Fei could enhance his combat power, and naturally, he could enhance his defense power. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, from now on, once that guy passes the heavenly tribulation successfully, remember to take me with you." Han Fei didn't want to die here in vain. As the saying went, where there's life, there's hope. Even if Xue Fan became a king, he might not be comparable to Han Fei in the same realm. Similarly, if Han Fei became a king, he might not be weaker than Xue Fan. Even if Xue Fan could survive today, as long as Han Fei was fast enough, he could catch up with him. Boom, the purple lightning pierced the clouds. Han Fei, Xue Fan, and the Blood Sea Divine Technique were all shrouded in this purple lightning. Perhaps because Xue Fan and the Divine Sun's tree bodies were too big, there were thousands of lightning bolts. In the endless lightning bolts, Han Fei drilled under the dragon bones. Under his feet, the coiled turtle array and the soul-driving array were crazily appearing and collapsing. Even so, Han Fei still trembled like Parkinson's disease. At this moment, the scene in Han Fei's eyes suddenly changed, the scene that he had seen in the past appeared once again. Han Fei realized that this was probably the last catastrophe of the extraterrestrial devils. Chapter 1625. After the last heavenly tribulation, the old turtle told Han Fei that the real heavenly tribulation would face a great tribulation that tested the foundation of one's mind. This Tao tribulation was different from ordinary heavenly tribulations. This Tao tribulation had both the power of ordinary heavenly tribulations and hidden extraterrestrial demons. As for what the extraterrestrial demons were, it was said that everyone saw them differently. Of course, it was still very different from those made by the Eye of Heavenly Path. It could be said to be an extraterrestrial demon, or a mental demon, or some kind of test of the way of heaven. Last time, when Han Fei encountered Jin Zhanghai's Wang tribulation, he only caught a glimpse of it and was woken up by the old turtle. This time, when the picture in front of Han Fei changed, everything seemed to be silent. It seemed that he didn't fight Xue Fan, it seemed that he had always been here. Mountains and rivers were broken, lava was everywhere, vegetation was burned, and smoke was everywhere. In Han Fei's vision, rivers were turbulent, and the ground was full of cracks. Most of the mountains and rivers had collapsed, and the vast land was like a battlefield filled with smoke. Han Fei stood alone in the sky, wearing a battle suit and panting slightly. Han Fei looked around and didn't know how he suddenly came here. Old Yuan, are you there? Han Fei called in his heart, but the old turtle didn't respond. Han Fei closed his eyes and tried to look at the demon purification pot. However, the demon purification pot didn't respond either. Damn it! What the hell is this place? Is this my extraterrestrial demon tribulation? No. The old turtle said that it shouldn't be my heavenly demon tribulation until it's my thunder tribulation. Han Fei thought about it and the embroidery needle appeared in his hand. He waited and it seemed to be fine. Han Fei didn't wait but shouted, Old Yuan, Old Yuan. Divine Prince, are you there? Han Fei flew across the sky at a slow speed. He flew thousands of kilometers casually and found that everywhere he touched, was the same. Han Fei could even perceive tens of thousands of kilometers away. That's not right. Is it a natural disaster or war damage down there? Han Fei was confused. The destruction in front of him didn't seem to be caused by a battle, but more like the collapse of mountains and rivers, like the end of the world. There were no traces of fighting or living creatures here. There was nothing but a collapsed land. Fuse. Han Fei seemed to think of something. With a thought, he tried to fuse with Little Black and Little White. In the end, nothing happened. Little Black and Little White did not merge with him. It's fake. Han Fei took a deep breath and looked at the embroidery needle in his hand. All this should be fake. Even if it was related to him, it was not something he should face now. Han Fei immediately closed his eyes and activated the surroundings with his mind. The void collapsed and cracks filled the sky. He was feeling the changes in his body. Until Han Fei felt his body was a little numb. At this moment, Han Fei roared, Tianqi, Buzz. At that moment, Han Fei suddenly came back to himself. When he opened his eyes, his indestructible golden body was on the verge of shattering. The old turtle shouted, Where did you go? It's not your heavenly demon, so why did you wait until now to use this heavenly awakening divine technique? Han Fei looked up. Fortunately, he had a King Realm dragon bone to protect him. Furthermore, he had used all of his strength to increase his defense, which was why he had been able to hold on until now. Han Fei had made up his mind. If he really couldn't kill Xue Fan this time, he would retreat first. Although the Divine Prince might die in Xue Fan's hands, he had tried his best. In the future, he would come back and kill Xue Fan. At this moment, a crazy roar shook Han Fei. Han Fei turned to look, only to see that Xue Fan had gone crazy. Countless roots were dancing wildly in the void and screaming under the lightning. As far as Han Fei could see, nearly half of his roots had collapsed and the tree was riddled with holes. And the most amazing thing was that Xue Fan's face was changing rapidly. On Xue Fan's tree, a large area of blood-like red flames was burning, covering his entire tree. In Han Fei's Forge the Universe, another 10,000 caddies of Earth Vein Spring were consumed. Without thinking, Han Fei also replenished the remaining 10,000 caddies of Earth Vein Spring. I don't have much else, but I'm tough. With the dragon bone, I can fight against the heavenly tribulation. The old turtle said, This is the hellfire. This person is a sinful and immoral demon. He has disrupted the order of the Great Tao and slaughtered millions of creatures just to expand his seat. Now it's his turn to be burned by the hellfire. Only if he survives this hellfire can he become a king. Han Fei's face was twisted and he gritted his teeth. I think he can endure it. At this moment, Xue Fan really seemed to have gone crazy. All kinds of rustling sounds came from his roots. Some were cursing, begging for mercy, angry, sad, accusing, and tragic. Han Fei didn't know if he was in the heavenly tribulation. He could hear them all. He felt that his head was about to explode. The old turtle said leisurely, I wonder if the disaster of the Emperor Sparrow has arrived. Logically speaking, as long as Xue Fan controls it well, these fallen creatures won't bite back. After all, Xue Fan has controlled this place for too long. Outside. The White Armor Emperor said leisurely, the hellfire burns and all creatures bite back. Even if he survives the heavenly tribulation, it's not perfect. Mu Wuhua, I hope you and I can put aside our prejudice for the time being. If he can survive the tribulation, kill him. At this moment, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen were no longer fighting. The White Armor Emperor had tricked Han Fei, but the Life Queen had no choice. Whether Han Fei would die or not, this Xue Fan had to die. Kacha. Han Fei looked at the cracks on his finger bones. They cracked open and then began to heal. The power of the heavenly tribulation was destroying his body while tempering it, providing energy to repair his bones. Needless to say, if Han Fei could survive the heavenly tribulation again, his body wouldn't be able to grow again. This time, it was even more exaggerated than the last time. After all, there were only 6 heavenly tribulations last time. This time, there were 9. He didn't know how much his physique needed to be trained to keep up with the strength of his bones. At this moment, Han Fei discovered that Xue Fan was much more miserable than him, and it was so miserable that it was deformed. Seeing Xue Fan in such a miserable state, Han Fei immediately said, Old Yuan, your soul power is so strong. Can you kill this guy? The old turtle was speechless. The heavenly tribulation hasn't passed yet. How can I kill him? I'll do it. Suddenly, Han Fei heard the Divine Sun's voice. The Divine Sun sighed faintly. I didn't expect that a moment of carelessness would lead to lifelong regret. Wang Han, say hello to the fairy for me. Han Fei's expression changed slightly. Divine Sun. What does he mean? Saying his last words. Bam, the Divine Sun's voice was unhurried. Xue Fan, your plan is almost impeccable. With you living in my body, you can resist this hellfire after all. However, my soul is at the King realm. In that case, I'll destroy your soul so that your 30,000 years of hard work will go down the drain. As if realizing something, Xue Fan howled, why do you want to die with me? You have nothing except a bit of residual origin. The Divine Sun's voice was unhurried. Because, I am God. Bam 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 in an instant, within 10,000 kilometers, it was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded countless times. The void storms were so dense that Han Fei couldn't tell north from south. In the outside world, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen hurriedly retreated. The shockwave of the explosion swept all the way for 50,000 kilometers. The Divine Sun had said that he was, after all, a god. He had once burned his divinity to shake a king as a venerable. Today, the Divine Sun maintained his usual pride. You want to use me to become a king? If I die, I'll let you die with me. The entire range of the Blood Sea Divine Tree became a death vortex. The void storms here didn't stop, and the heavenly tribulation disappeared. But what replaced it were 7 consecutive booms. 7 cracks appeared, and a rain of blood covered the entire waterwood sky. Whether it was the Cloud Sea Divine Tree or the White Shell Royal City, they were all drenched by the rain of blood. 50,000 kilometers away, the White Armor Emperor couldn't help but grin. Well, that's good. From now on, the Blood Sea Divine Tree City will no longer exist in this world. TSK, what a pity. That's equivalent to 3 kings. The White Armor Emperor laughed loudly and stepped into the air. Before she had gone far, the Life Queen heard the White Armor Emperor shout, White Shell Royal City, listen to my command. Attack the Blood Sea Divine Tree City. At this moment, the White Armor Emperor was in high spirits. He had made the right decision to keep Han Fei in the tribulation. Within 50,000 kilometers, including those venerables and peak masters under Xue Fan, they were already very far away. They were supposed to help Xue Fan. As a result, several of them were killed by the aftermath. As a result, 7 cracks appeared in the sky in a row. And according to the intensity of these cracks, 2 of them were extremely thick. There was also a tragic cry coming from the sky. It seemed that a king had fallen and the great Tao was mourning. The White Armor Emperor felt that since the 2 kings were dead, how could Han Fei still be alive? Therefore, the White Armor Emperor knew that it was time to wash the Blood Sea Divine Tree City with blood. All the resources here were first come, first served. Mu Wuhua would probably do the same thing. Mu Wuhua also sighed faintly. Under her heavy protection, the octopus that Han Fei gave her disintegrated. She didn't know why Han Fei gave her this octopus. Maybe it was to tell her whether he had died or not. However, Mu Wuhua didn't notice that the moment little fatty disintegrated, it turned into white light and dissipated in the dazzling light of the explosion. Chapter 1626. A month later. In a deep cave on the broken trunk of the Blood Sea Divine Wood, a golden skeleton was sitting cross-legged. In front of the skeleton was a mass of flesh and blood. And in this cave, there was a massive amount of blue soul fire. These soul fires were slowly penetrating into the flesh and blood. Next to the skeleton, little fatty lay quietly and said weakly, 5 times, I can still be resurrected 5 times. Just half a day ago, Han Fei had just come back to life. This time, Han Fei was really dead, but death didn't mean death. When Forge the Universe was useless, little fatty's resurrection technique was a divine skill. At the last moment, in the terrifying explosion, Han Fei suffered an impact. However, it was an unparalleled impact on his soul. If he resisted it head-on, maybe he could barely survive, but he would have to look for ownerless souls everywhere. But in fact, Han Fei was already prepared. However, to Han Fei's shock, Xue Fan had already parasitized his flesh and blood, but he had never activated it. Because Xue Fan didn't control the soul and only parasitized the body, the demon purification pot didn't move. In the end, Han Fei decided to blow himself up. The reason why Han Fei dared to blow himself up was that this place would become a dangerous place. The void collapsed, and it was difficult to recover. Anyone below the king level would almost die if they came in. And it was impossible for the king level to come in. First of all, they also had to face the danger of the void storm. In addition, without Xue Fan and the Divine Sun, there were only 2 kings left in the entire Waterwood sky, the White Armor Emperor and the Life Queen. Who dared to break into the forbidden area and find treasures that might not necessarily exist? In fact, in that kind of explosion, they didn't think there would be any treasures left. Once one of them came in, the other person would probably attack the venerable realm powerhouse on the other side. This was unacceptable to both sides. So, at the last moment, Han Fei chose to blow himself up. He gambled on luck. Accustomed to life and death, Han Fei didn't hesitate to die. Besides, he had a backup plan. If his main body died, his avatar would still be in the demon ceiling pagoda. One day, his avatar would return and take back everything here. It could even be said that it was not his avatar. Back then, he had actually cut off half of his divine soul and stuffed it into his clone. It was called an outer body incarnation, but in reality, it was only because his main memories existed in this body. But it turned out that Little Fatty would return after the self-detonation. The contract between Little Fatty and Han Fei was immortality. When his 9 lives were used up, if he died again, he wouldn't be able to come back. Little Fatty was exhausted because it was too difficult to revive Han Fei. It had been resurrected on the first day. And Han Fei's body was absorbing the energy and spiritual energy here to repair itself. It took a whole month, and only half a day ago did it form a head and return a wisp of its soul. The moment he came back to life, Han Fei was amazed. He only had a head left, but he was still alive. However, Forge the universe was still there. The earth vein spring had been used up, but the vitality-type spirit fruits from Immortal City were still there. So, Han Fei returned to forge the universe. A massive amount of spirit fruits shattered, and the heavenly awakening divine technique continued to descend. Han Fei didn't recover outside, mainly because he was afraid that the White Armor Emperor would find out. If that happened, it would be troublesome if the White Armor Emperor broke in and killed him. At this moment, Han Fei came outside to cultivate because a large number of ownerless souls had been accumulated outside. Han Fei scattered a large number of souls to absorb them. In the end, the ownerless souls filled this tree whole. Just like this, Han Fei continued to plunder. The Divine Sun and Xue Fan died together, but unfortunately, he didn't expect to take Han Fei away. Otherwise, would he have chosen to perish together with Xue Fan? Huff! Han Fei's flesh ball was practicing the indestructible tyrant body. It was the first time that Han Fei could be so safe and steady, and it was the first time that he had enough ownerless souls to practice the indestructible tyrant body. Han Fei wondered if Ren Tianfei had ever considered that the later stages of this great technique would be so difficult when he created it. Now, if Han Fei forcibly devoured the ownerless souls here, his soul power could definitely reach more than 200,000. However, Han Fei left all these ownerless souls for his body. He was going to cultivate the indestructible tyrant body to the peak. Another day passed. When Han Fei plundered all the ownerless souls he could find, he entered Forge the Universe again. Huff! Han Fei's big mouth let out a long breath. Although he didn't need to breathe, it had become a habit. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, when I was looking for ownerless souls, I found two things. First, there seems to be no way out of here." Han Fei sat cross-legged again, and his consciousness appeared in the depths of his sea of consciousness. Han Fei saw that the demon purification pot was pressing on the old turtle. Needless to say, during his death, the old turtle must have wanted to escape. However, Han Fei didn't care at all and just said, "Yo. Old Yuan, are you tired of being pressed like this?" The old turtle seemed to have been pressed for a long time and was used to it now. He said, "What's the second thing?" Han Fei smiled faintly. "The second thing? I found that you secretly swallowed at least 100,000 ownerless souls. Don't tell me you didn't have any." "I searched everywhere here, but I only found about 100,000 in total." The old turtle scoffed. "They were taken away by the void chasm. When you died, I was pressed by the gourd and didn't have time to steal your ownerless souls." Han Fei sneered. "Oh. Really? If you say so, then so be it. I don't care about the ownerless souls. However, this was your best chance to escape. You missed it. Don't blame me. This time you couldn't run away. It means that you have no hope of escaping. So, you can think about signing a master-servant contract. Don't wait until I return to the Thousand-Star City, wipe out the big clans, and unify the Yin-Yang Heaven. At that time, I will be the real Ninth Immortal Master, controlling the life and death of hundreds of millions of people." Humph! The old turtle snorted softly and didn't speak again. However, he was also extremely sad in his heart. Who could have known that Han Fei was dead and this gourd was still pressing on him? "Do I have a fucking grudge against you?" Unfortunately, he didn't run away. At this moment, the old turtle was indeed thinking about what Han Fei said. This kid's luck was really explosive. He had hitched a ride on Wang Jie's coattails twice, but he had not been able to kill him. Last time, he saved Han Fei but didn't have time to run away. This time, he couldn't save Han Fei, but he couldn't run away either. Guessing that the old turtle must be cursing him to death at this moment, Han Fei said leisurely, "Old Yuan, we are already so familiar with each other. You can really consider it." "Okay, that's all I have to say. I need to cultivate in seclusion for a while. You still have a lot of time to think about it." Forge the universe. In Han Fei's skeleton eyes, the soul fire flickered. It was the first day he woke up. He had done too many things and hadn't checked his physical condition yet. A string of information appeared in his eyes. Owner Han Fei level, 89, peak level venerable, chaotic energy, 523 spiritual power, 125,001 perception range, 45,000 kilometers power, 14618 waves first spiritual heritage, unknown second spiritual heritage, unknown first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level, 77, second spiritual beast, Emperor Sparrow, level, 59, main art, void fishing, level 6, sky stealing technique, venerable level, divine quality. Han Fei was not surprised to see the level of the peak level advanced. Venerable. Last time, the 6th level heavenly tribulation allowed him to reach the peak level intermediate venerable. However, his realm was stuck and his body almost broke. This time, if he didn't reach the peak level advanced venerable, he would feel sorry for the 9th level heavenly tribulation. The growth of spiritual power might be because he swallowed more ownerless souls after his resurrection. Obviously, the growth of strength was not only brought about by the growth of his realm, but also by the tempering of the heavenly tribulation. Oh no! To be precise, it was brought about by the tempering of the heavenly tribulation. If he had tempered his body as well, he would probably have more than 15,000 waves at this moment. There weren't many other changes. Almost 200 wisps of chaotic energy were gone. There was nothing he could do. He was reluctant to spend 200 wisps of chaotic energy fighting a quasi-king. Then what was the point of fighting? Although it was painful, it was worth it. In fact, there was another thing to be thankful for, the dragon head bone that was bombarded by lightning. At this moment, it had probably become a real top-level refining material. It was the skeleton of a king. Now, after being tempered by the heavenly tribulation, the dragon bones were emitting lightning. How many sea-quelling bizarre treasures could be made from this? Although Han Fei hadn't started making them yet, this dragon head bone had already become the most valuable treasure in Forge the Universe. It was even more valuable than the whole dragon corpse. Of course, the top priority was not the dragon head bone, but to repair Han Fei's body. While repairing, his body also needed to cultivate the indestructible tyrant body. Not only that, Han Fei also started his dragon bone swallowing plan. In any case, the power in the dragon bones could also temper his body. In Forge the Universe. 3 years later. Han Fei was calcining himself. As early as the first year, nearly 100,000 ownerless souls were fused into his body, and Han Fei's flesh and blood could already be attached to his body, but it was still not so perfect. And the indestructible tyrant body had reached a wonderful critical moment, that was, the unification of the body, bones, and soul. Right now, his bones and the power of his divine soul were unquestionable. They were basically the requirements of the great Tao. Maybe his soul was still not perfect, but it was better than his flesh and blood. When Han Fei's body of flesh and blood really reached the same level as the indestructible golden body, he would have mastered the indestructible tyrant body, and it would also be the end of the body refining part of this great technique below the king realm. In the second year, the dragon energy swallowed by the dragon swallowing technique tempered his body, so that Han Fei's body finally stopped shattering. In the third year, Han Fei had already begun to study a new body refining technique. But for a whole year, Han Fei found that except for continuing to temper his flesh and blood with the indestructible tyrant body, other body refining techniques were of no use to strengthen his physique. At this point, Han Fei didn't want to wait any longer. He was going to leave here. Just when Han Fei decided to leave, the old turtle suddenly said, "Han Fei, sign the contract."